Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants,
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished representatives, I declare open the fourth plenary session. This afternoon, we'll continue looking at item 7 on the agenda, part of the general debate. States are invited, in accordance with Rule 50 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly, to deliver statements of no longer than 5 minutes. In order to assist the speakers with the timely delivery of their statements, a light mechanism was installed at the lectern. In order to accommodate all speakers, this time limit shall be strictly observed. As indicated this morning, written or pre-recorded statements submitted in lieu of in-person statements as of yesterday will be posted on the respective webpage of the Assembly. I would invite delegations to please check the list of speakers dated 3rd December 2024, 1:30 p.m., available at the conference officer's desk, as there have been multiple changes. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, let's proceed immediately with our first speaker. His Excellency, Madame Vibeke Pasternak-Jorgensen, Sub-Secretary of Legal Affairs from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. Madam, Undersecretary, you have the floor. Many thanks.
Madam President, Excellencies, I'm honored to address this 23rd Assembly of States Parties, where we gather at a crucial time for our court. The ICC faces new fundamental external threats and difficult internal challenges. It is on us as states parties to define our goals for the future of the court, to defend its mandate, and to jointly overcome this crisis. Denmark aligns itself fully with the statement delivered by the European Union. For us, the ICC remains a crucial actor in upholding international law and in the fight against impunity. The court is as important now as it has ever been. In a time where the ICC, its judges, and its staff continue to face unacceptable attacks and threats, we reiterate our strong support. Madam President, even in these difficult times, it is our hope that a dialogue-based approach and a well-managed and results-oriented court will eventually lead to universal membership of the court. In that regard, we warmly welcome Armenia and, of course, most recently, Ukraine as new members of this Assembly. We encourage others to follow suit. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the review mechanism for its excellent work and guidance in the past years. Denmark calls on all court actors to further support the ongoing implementation process. We also thank civil society for their meaningful contributions in this regard. The implementation phase ought to continue in an efficient, inclusive, and transparent manner. The Rome Statute is based on the principle of complementarity. In this regard, it is important to adopt national legislation based on the Rome Statute to ensure effective cooperation with the court, as well as the domestic prosecution of crimes under the jurisdiction of the court. The Danish government has recently presented to Parliament a new draft chapter for the Danish Criminal Code, which will criminalize torture, war crimes, and crimes against humanity as specific crimes in the Danish national legislation. And furthermore, the government has also proposed to ratify the existing amendments to the Rome Statute, including the crime of aggression, by the beginning of 2025. In this context, we look forward to the upcoming review of the Kampala amendments and call on all member states to actively engage in the preparations. Considering the overall situation the court finds itself in, we believe that it is crucial to have a successful review conference in July 2025 in order to strengthen the ICC and send a signal of unity and consensus. Madam President, a few weeks from now, Denmark will join the UN Security Council. One of our priorities while on the Council will be to stand up for international law and to advance accountability for grave violations of international law. This includes addressing the two situations which the Security Council has already referred to the ICC, but also new atrocity crimes committed there, and especially in the Darfur region. Madam President, the ICC is a judicial institution that acts in a political reality. Jointly, we will focus on the core issues and work to strengthen the court. The fight against impunity is as crucial now as ever. Thank you.
Je vous remercie pour votre déclaration.
Many thanks for your statement. I give the floor now to the second speaker, His Excellency, the Ambassador Roberto Casadilla Sarmiento, Ambassador from the plurinational state of Bolivia. You have the floor, sir. Thank you, Madam President. Distinguished representatives of state parties to the Rome Statute, distinguished delegates, representatives of civil society, on behalf of the plurinational state of Bolivia, at this 23rd Assembly of the state parties of the Rome Statute of the ICC, I want to take advantage of this opportunity to transmit a warm welcome from our president that was constitutionally elected, Luis Alberto Carce Catacora, and also convey the wish of the plurinational state to express their most sincere recognition to the work of the International Criminal Court in its role to investigate and judge those crimes that affect the international community, such as genocide, or crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. Similarly, I want to emphasize the excellent work that's carried out by the different bodies of the court and the good offices carried out for the organization and processing of the Assembly. Currently, we are facing extraordinary challenges that are putting to the test the scope of the statute, leaving to the court the task to resolve, in accordance with the principles of the statute, with effectiveness and diligence, complex cases and new challenges as regards international criminal law, overcoming internal challenges, but also dealing with major geopolitical challenges that are inadmissible. It has to be a space, an effort for all state parties, and in that context, the plurinational state of Bolivia ratifies its commitment with international criminal law, expressing its consent on the major principles in that connection, and its full cooperation with the court, on top of making an appeal to implement mechanisms for prevention and protection of the Rome Statute in the face of the continued threats that challenge not only the court itself, but the international legal order as part of the multilateral architecture we live in. Bolivia is a state that negotiated the Rome Statute and ratified said statute in 2002. It also ratified the amendment on crimes of aggression in 2020, and it continues with the ratification process for the amendment to Article 8 to the Rome Statute, which includes new acts which represent war crimes. Bolivia is also part of the Agreement on Privileges and Immunities of the ICC, ratified in 2006. Bolivia is aware of the fact that the progress made can be increased, and that's why we continue to work on an internal legal system on the basis of dialogue with the largest number of actors possible, so as to lay solid foundations for prevention and the prosecution of international crimes through the Bolivian legal authorities, which is why it's extremely important to have technical support and cooperation with the ICC. Bolivia recognizes the importance of providing proper financial support for the program and budget of the ICC. This is an indispensable component to be able to reach the goals and objectives of the statute in full. That is why this delegation supports the need to keep the current budgets for all programs. Nevertheless, in these uncertain times, Bolivia has to face and implement an austerity policy with a view to guarantee efficient and effective resources to be able to face the distant challenges that are hers, as is the case of many other state parties. And we appeal to the different bodies of the court to implement policies that are efficient and in accordance with austerity, and that keep in mind the international context and the reality of the member states here present. We also want to emphasize the importance of moving forward on complementarity, geographical representation, as well as the need to maintain diversity, multilingualism, gender equality. And also, we want to emphasize the importance of making efforts to improve the working environment at the court. The plurinational state of Bolivia, as a peaceful state that promotes a culture of peace, has a vocation to promote respect for international law. And therefore, we uphold the importance of the ICC and its crucial role to fight against impunity. We recognize and want to applaud the important advances in the issuance of arrest warrants in the context of Palestine, as well as other recent cases, and we make an appeal to the court to continue with investigation processes in an impartial manner, so that these crimes can be judged and do not remain with impunity. This appeal is also extended to the President and to the prosecutor to speed up the work on these ongoing investigations. As state parties, we have the role of protecting international law and upholding international humanitarian law. It is absolutely necessary that we have a strengthened ICC with the proper conditions guaranteed so that it can accomplish its mission. So we appeal to all states so that they condemn any state any action by a state party or non-party that would be against its safety, as well as any measures against it. Madam President, I will conclude my statement reaffirming my staunch support and that of the plurinational state of Bolivia to uphold international law and our ICC so as to guarantee universal access to criminal justice. We make a cordial appeal and a brotherly appeal, indeed, to all states so that we can continue strengthening the court through the ratification of its main instruments and also to cooperate with it whenever it's necessary. We applaud the adhesion of Armenia and Ukraine. And lastly, just to point out, Madam President, that to build an international society that's free of impunity requires firm will. We need to strengthen institutions precisely like the International Criminal Court. And I hope that this statement can be considered as an official document for this session and will be included in future publications. Thank you very much.
Excellences, je vous remercie.
Excellency, thank you for your statement. I give the floor now to Madam Ambassador, Her Excellency Madam Clara Núñez dos Santos, the Ambassador of Portugal. You have the floor.
Madam President, distinguished delegates, it is for me a great honor to address the Assembly of State Parties of the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court on behalf of Portugal and as the Ambassador of Portugal in The Hague, the home of the International Criminal Court. Portugal aligns itself with the statement delivered by Hungary on behalf of the European Union and its member states. Additionally, we would like to further highlight some aspects of relevance to us. Madam President, please allow us to begin by giving a word of appreciation for your work as President of the Assembly of the State Parties. We also wish to thank the ACP Secretariat and its former director, Renan Villasis, for the immense contribution in facilitating the important functions of this Assembly, wishing him all the best for his future endeavors. Let me congratulate as well the new President of the Court, as well as the judges elected during the last session of the Assembly. We are confident on their future contribution to the work of the Court and to international justice and peace in general. Portugal would like also to commend the Office of the Prosecutor for launching yesterday its policy on slavery crimes. And we take this opportunity to welcome the newest state party, Armenia, and to congratulate Ukraine for having recently ratified the Rome Statute. Integrity and universality of the Rome Statute remain and will remain a priority for Portugal. Madam President, we stand here today at a time when, once again, the resilience of the ICC is being put to the test by the challenges resulting from conflicts affecting the world in a particularly tense political context. We regret and denounce any threats or any sanctions against the Court and its officials, which we consider to be a serious interference in the independence and impartiality of an international court that jeopardize the exercise of its functions. Nevertheless, it is our strongest belief that, with support of all of us, the Court will prevail as a stronger international judicial entity in fighting against impunity. Its role in contributing to a lasting and sustainable peace is not negotiable and needs to be preserved. Our collective resolve is crucial to protect not only the Court, but also the values and principles it represents. Madam President, the review mechanism has come to its conclusion this year, and Portugal welcomes the effort made both by the Court and state parties to address the independent experts' recommendations. It is our belief that this process led to an increase in the efficiency and effectiveness of the Court, as well as to a better overall perception of the ICC and its fundamental role. It is important that we remain seized on this matter. This year, the ACP will decide on a review conference in 2025 on the review of the amendments of the crime of aggression as foreseen in the compromise adopted in Kampala. Portugal sees this conference as the opportunity to harmonize the ICC jurisdiction over all four of the Rome Statute's core crimes, and is deeply engaged in this process. Current times have shown the need for the Court to have all means to fully exercise its jurisdiction over this crime. Madam President, removing the causes of violence, fighting impunity, and reaffirming core values and principles that underpin the idea of human dignity are crucial to our common future. Much is being done, and there is no doubt that the Court has a core role in this historical mission. Countering impunity by the ICC has a deterrent effect at domestic, regional, and international levels, and has become a fundamental tool to prevent further perpetrations of serious crimes. State parties, together with the ICC, must continue striving to reach these goals and contribute to bringing to justice the perpetrators of the most serious crimes. Since the ICC has a complementary nature, it is always important to keep in mind that criminal jurisdiction over those responsible for such crimes primarily starts and lies with states and their national jurisdictions. Portugal takes also the opportunity to acknowledge the important role that civil society plays towards this end. Madam President, allow me to conclude by reiterating Portugal's full support to the ICC in pursuing its difficult but crucial mission, preventing international law violations, countering impunity, ensuring accountability, providing reparation, and enabling reconciliation. We owe it to the victims and to the coming generations. We pledge our full commitment to working with you and with others, all the other delegations, towards a successful 23rd section of the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute. Thank you, Madam President.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you, Excellency, for your statement. I give the floor now to Mr. Zikrul Hassan Fahad, First Secretary of Bangladesh
Thank you, Madam President, for giving me the floor. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the People's Republic of Bangladesh, I extend our sincere congratulations to you, Madam President, for your exceptional leadership of this Assembly. Our thanks also go to all members of the Bureau, as well as to the principals of the Court, including the Office of the Prosecutor, the Registry, and the Trust Fund for Victims for their unwavering dedication to advancing the ICC's mission. The spirit of justice that brings us together here today is a testament to the enduring values of the Rome Statute. Madam President, Bangladesh's commitment to the Rome Statute and the work of the International Criminal Court runs deep. Our own history, shaped by the profound suffering endured during the 1971 War of Liberation, has instilled in us an unwavering resolve to combat impunity. In recent times, the world has witnessed the crimes committed against the students and the people in Bangladesh in July 2024 during the Monsoon Revolution, who were demanding equity and justice. The interim government led by Nobel laureate Professor Muhammad Yunus in Bangladesh is committed to ensure promotion and protection of human rights and fundamental rights of citizens, equity, accountability, and dispensing of justice, aligning with the universal principles of human rights. Madam President, since August 2017, Bangladesh has been sheltering over 1.2 million forcefully displaced Rohingya people from Myanmar, fleeing all sorts of prosecutable crimes. They have been aptly described as one of the most persecuted communities in the world. We thank the Office of the Prosecutor for its ongoing investigations about the atrocities committed against the Rohingyas in by Myanmar military junta. We welcome the application submitted by the prosecutor for an arrest warrant against Myanmar General and Acting President Min Aung Hlaing. This significant step serves as a beacon of hope for justice and accountability for crimes committed against the Rohingya people, and is essential for fostering conditions that allow for the safe, voluntary, and dignified return of the Rohingya to Myanmar. We remain committed to extending all possible support to the OTP for successful completion of the ongoing investigation on the Rohingya situation. I thank the prosecutor for undertaking a visit to Bangladesh a few days back. Madam President, Bangladesh is deeply troubled by the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza, the broader occupied Palestinian territories, and Lebanon. The ICC has an essential role to play in investigating and addressing potential war crimes and crimes against humanity by Israeli occupation forces in this region. Recently, the International Court of Justice issued an advisory opinion that Israel's 57-year occupation of the occupied Palestinian territory remains illegal. In this context, Bangladesh welcomes the issuance of arrest warrants against key individuals of Israeli leadership for their involvement. Madam President, Bangladesh underscores the importance of ICC's complementarity principle, which encourages national jurisdictions to prosecute international crimes within their own legal system. We believe this model can serve as an example for others and call on the ICC to expand its technical assistance, particularly in the areas of victim and witness protection, to support national justice efforts around the world. Adequate funding is crucial for the ICC's ability to operate effectively, and we urge all state parties to consider extending budgetary support commensurating its mandate. Bangladesh also supports ongoing review initiatives and encourages sustained efforts to enhance geographical representation and gender balance within the ICC's structure to address the gaps in equitable geographical representation. Madam President, as we commemorate the 26th anniversary of the Rome Statute, Bangladesh underscores the importance of expanding the reach of the Rome Statute and promoting its universality. Bangladesh welcomes the membership of Armenia and Ukraine and reiterates its call to the remaining UN member states to join the Rome Statute to bolster the collective commitment of ICC to end impunity for the gravest crimes of concern to the international community. To conclude, Madam President, I reiterate Bangladesh's firm support for the ICC's mission to deliver justice and accountability for all sorts of grievous crimes under jurisdiction of the ICC. We share the Court's aspiration for a world bounded in peace, security, and human rights. As we move forward together, let us renew our commitment to a world where justice knows no borders and impunity finds no refuge. Thank you, Madam President.
Merci beaucoup de votre déclaration.
Thank you very much for that statement. And I should now recognize the next speaker, Mr. Donatellas Laslarman, the Minister and Advisor, the Foreign Advisor of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sierra Leone. You have the floor.
Madam President, distinguished delegates, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Attorney General and Minister of Justice of the Republic of Sierra Leone. At this critical juncture for international law and criminal justice, amidst the paradoxes we face and the urgency to protect the gains made, the Republic of Sierra Leone reaffirms its unwavering commitments to the International Criminal Court, international criminal justice, and the Rome Statute system. The unprecedented external attack and threat against the court and its officials and those cooperating with it strike at the very integrity of international law and criminal justice. These attacks, though not new, reflect on increasingly complex and volatile global environment which the courts operates. Sierra Leone, having experienced its own painful journey at conflicts and resolutions, understands the transformative role of international justice in healing wounds and preventing future atrocities. Our commitments to the ICC and the principles of the Rome Statute remain steadfast. However, we must also acknowledge the formidable obstacles standing in the way of accountability. In this context, the principles of universality, justice applied impartially and without fear or favor, is being tested. If we as state parties fail to uphold our collective responsibility, we risk reducing the court to an institution of limited reach and influence. It is our duty to ensure that the court remains independent, impartial, transparent, and free from political interference. Madam President, the external threat against the court and its officials are a direct result of the court's fulfilling its mandate. Sierra Leone commends President George Timoke Akane and the presidency of the court for their exemplary leadership, and to thank Prosecutor Karim Khan and Registrar Osvaldo Zavala Gila for their unwavering commitment promoting global justice and the fight against impunity. Sierra Leone welcomes the court's ongoing activity, which reflects on an intense engagement with significant issues resulting to a high workload during the intersessional period 2023 to 2024. We note with appreciation the 29 cases and 16 situations currently before the court, including the situation in Afghanistan and the 3 preliminary examinations concluded by the Office of the Prosecutor. For the court to fulfill its mandate, Sierra Leone stresses the importance of continued cooperation from state parties, particularly in executing arrest warrants. We acknowledge the ICC's prosecutors' request for arrest warrants and the issuance of such warrants in various situations under investigation. We urge adherence to judicial processes in case of disagreements, reinforcing the supremacy of law and rejecting the notion that might is right. The court's roles in fights against impunity for the gravest crimes, war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity remains indispensable. In this regard, We recognize the importance of this Assembly's focus on agreeing to modalities for the review of crime of aggression. We believe harmonizing the law on the exercise of jurisdiction over the crime of aggression with other core crimes under the Rome Statute is essential for consistency and for reinforcing our collective commitment to global justice and accountability. The universality of the Rome Statute is crucial in closing impunity gap. We welcome Armenia as the 124th state party to the Rome Statute and applaud Ukraine's decision to ratify the Rome Statute, eagerly anticipating its membership in early 2025. Our commitment to the ICC is unwavering, particularly in support of victims of atrocities crime. We strongly endorse the Trust Fund for Victims. We play a vital role in providing reparation, include restitution and rehabilitation for victims of the Rome Statute crime. We commend the Trust Fund's efforts, notably on the ongoing case, which provides support to over 24,000 individuals in 2023. As we remain committed to supporting the Trust Funds for Victims' vital work, the government of Sierra Leone is accordingly pleased to nominate Mr. Ibrahim Sori Yila for re-election as member of the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for the benefit of victims, for one seat allocated to the African states, scheduled to be held in The Hague this session. As we congratulate the board members already elected by the Assembly, we wish to further note that Mr. Yila, who has served successfully as Vice Chair of the Board in his historic period, has requisite competence, qualification, and experience to ensure his continuing valuable contribution in advancing the principles, objectives, and purpose of the Trust Fund. We look forward to the support of all state parties in this important re-election bid. Let me close, Madam President. Sierra Leone remains firm in its belief that international crime justice is not luxury, but a necessity for global peace and security. Let me ensure that the ICC remains an institution that reflects the aspiration of the global community, independent, impartial, and capable of delivering justice without fear or favor. I thank you.
Je vous remercie de votre déclaration.
Thank you very much for that statement. Let me now give the floor to the next speaker on our list, Her Excellency, Madam Consuelo Femenia Guardiola, the Ambassador of Spain to the Netherlands. You have the floor, Your Excellency. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. It's an honor to speak before this Assembly on behalf of Spain. My country fully aligns itself with the statement of the European Union. In our national capacity, Spain reiterates its firm and steadfast support to the work of the International Criminal Court in its fight against impunity. We see a global context where there is a proliferation of conflicts, accompanied by the most heinous crimes and atrocities. And in this context, and particularly in this one, accountability is more relevant than ever. Upholding international standards is the best antidote to strengthening confidence in the multilateral system under which the international community has been governed since 1945. Spain would like to underscore its commitment to the ICC, and not just as a matter of words, but as a matter of acts and comprehensive and effective support to the court through financial contributions, judicial cooperation, and capacity building of human resources. In 2023, Spain made voluntary contributions to the court to the tune of 6 million euros. They were earmarked for the OTP, the trust funds for complementarity and security. And in addition to this contribution, and in line with the priority status that we have given to the protection and reparations of victims, 2 million euros have been earmarked for the Trust Fund for Victims in order to make it possible for the victims of atrocious crimes across the globe to get some restorative justice. We would also point out the 1 million euros that were earmarked to close the Lubanga case in order to provide reparations to child soldiers. And this year, Spain will be keeping its current level of financial support to the court. Similarly, Spain has strengthened the human resources of the court by facilitating 4 JPOs that were seconded to the OTP, the registry, and the TFV. We are now concluding the domestic procedures in order to ratify the agreement on the enforcement of ICC sentences, and that includes provisions regarding relocating witnesses and other key collaborators. Madam Vice President, any failure to cooperate with the court keeps the court from being able to fulfill its mission. And so we call on states parties to comply with the arrest warrants that are issued by the court. These are fundamental in order to prevent the most serious international crimes and to bolster confidence in international criminal justice as a system. We also would urge states not party to join this statute, and we welcome the accession of Armenia and look forward to the welcoming Ukraine into the fold as well. Spain rejects out of hand all threats and attacks against the court and its officials, and it supports the European Union's activating its blockade status against possible sanctions. And beyond this, we also are active participants in the group of friends of the review of the Rome Statute, and we support reviewing the Kampala amendments so that the ICC can extend its jurisdiction to the crime of aggression on an equal footing with other crimes that are set forth in the statute. We defend the jurisdiction of the ICC in specific cases, for example, Palestine. We would believe or advocate that we adopt an approach that strengthens the intervention of the court in crimes that particularly target women and children, which often have been given short shrift in criminal justice. And here, Spain, along with Chile, Costa Rica, France, Luxembourg, and Mexico, presented last week a brief to the OTP on the situation in Afghanistan in light of the serious degradation of the plight of women and girls in Afghanistan. Faced with the crisis of credibility that multilateralism is currently experiencing, we stand for enhanced multilateralism, strengthened multilateralism. We believe in the force of the international order based on the rule of laws. And one of those pillars upholding the entire system is the notion of accountability. And that is why Spain will continue working bilaterally with the court in this assembly and all other relevant fora in order to guarantee the court's independence. We will support its work as it fights against impunity. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President.
Excellence, chers collègues, je vous remercie.
Excellency, dear colleague, thank you for the statement, and I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Aden Mohamed Dileita, the Ambassador of Djibouti to Belgium. You have the floor.
Madame la Présidente.
Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's an honor for me to speak to the Assembly of State Parties. First of all, I want to thank the organizers for having prepared and made the necessary efforts to make this assembly a success, and we congratulate you, Madam President, for the way you are organizing the work of the Bureau and the Assembly. I also want to congratulate the newly elected judges and the President of the Court, Judge Tsumoko Akane. You can count on the unfailing support of my country. In 2024, slightly over 20 years since the entry into force of the Rome Statute, the ICC is more than ever facing multiple challenges, but also has to face up to numerous challenges when it was created precisely so as to be able to respond to the need for universal justice, that the need of the victims, because there is no peace without justice. Madam President, 2024 also marks a historic advance for justice with the issuance by the ICC of several arrest warrants against perpetrators that have been in breach of the most fundamental and basic principles of international law. With overwhelming and gruesome evidence in Gaza, the prosecutor has accomplished his mission in accordance with the Rome Statute to present these documents and arrest warrants against the authors of crimes of war and crimes against humanity on the soil of the state of Palestine, the Gaza Strip in particular. The authors of these crimes and those who have committed them, ordered them, or planned them need to be made accountable towards victims that are mainly children and women, which is why the Republic of Djibouti is a depository of referral documents in November 2023, together with other countries that share the very same concerns, so that the ICC can pay special attention to the urgency and the severity of the situation in Gaza, and we are pleased by this decision by the prosecutor. After the issuance of these arrest warrants by the ICC, the Republic of Djibouti observes with deep concern the unease among several state parties to the Rome Statute that are nevertheless held to the same international standards. There cannot be a double standard when it comes to justice or the implementation of legal decisions handed down by the court. Furthermore, the Republic of Djibouti condemns in the firmest of terms any threat or attack against the court and its officers and reaffirms its complete and total support to said court. We believe that the court needs to have all the necessary resources and all necessary support to be able to fulfill its mission, and needs to be supported and defended by all, despite the pressures that are trying to be made to bear against it. We want to emphasize once again the importance of restorative justice, which is an essential part of the Rome Statute. This is essential for victims that only want justice to be done. The credibility of the court is at stake. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you.
Je vous remercie, Excellence, de votre...
Thank you, Your Excellency, for that statement. And I now give the floor to Madam Cecilia Sigurðardóttir, the Director General of Legal Affairs from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Iceland. You have the floor, Madam.
The floor. Merci beaucoup. Madam President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor to address this Assembly today on behalf of the Government of Iceland, a proud state party to the Rome Statute. We convene this 23rd session of the Assembly at a time where armed conflict grows more rife, more intense, and less humane. We face a world that is in grave danger of unraveling into the injustices of war, which previous generations worked so hard to prevent. A world where adherence to international law and the rule of law is increasingly challenged. A world that needs the International Criminal Court as profoundly as ever. Our court of last resort to prosecute the most serious of crimes. Madam President, in times such as these, we reflect back on the mandate we have undertaken as an international community. When the generations that witnessed the greatest horrors of the 20th century came together as a United Nations to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war. The establishment of a permanent International Criminal Court was always integral to this mandate, to deliver justice to the victims and communities harmed and put an end to impunity for those who commit atrocities under the veil of official immunities. To work in the interest of peace, because without justice, there cannot be no lasting peace. Madam President, we must not forget what a remarkable achievement the establishment of the International Criminal Court was. The lessons we have learned in the 22 years since the court began operations have emboldened our conviction of the importance of an independent and impartial International Criminal Court to advance and uphold international criminal justice. The government of Iceland is proud to have been among the first states to sign and ratify the Rome Statute, and in 2016, the Kampala Amendments on the crime of aggression. The international community must be able to redress this core international crime against the most fundamental principle of the UN Charter. We encourage states parties to ratify the Kampala Amendments as soon as possible. Russia's crime of aggression against Ukraine reminds us of the pressing need for the International Criminal Court to be effectively able to exercise jurisdiction over this crime. Next year's review conference offers an opportunity to address the current limitations of the Kampala Amendments. Madam President, a year from now, when the Assembly reconvenes for its 24th session, we very possibly will be faced with an equally or even more challenging international situation. The court faces unprecedented threats from external actors for faithfully carrying out its mandate, a mandate it owes to the peoples of the world. This is deeply concerning. Such attacks or threats against the court, its officials, or those who work with it are unacceptable attempts at influencing independent investigations and impartial judicial proceedings. We thank the court's officials and staff for their hard work under these challenging circumstances. I take this opportunity to reiterate Iceland's unwavering commitment to defend the principles enshrined in the Rome Statute and to the International Criminal Court. In these testing times, we must remain principled in our approach to the work of the court. We reaffirm our commitment to cooperate fully with the court in its investigation and prosecution of the crimes within its jurisdiction. This is essential for the court's ability to carry out its mandate. We therefore call upon all states parties to cooperate with the court in the interest of international criminal justice and of peace and security. Madam President, victims are at the heart of the Rome Statute system. We commend the work of the Trust Fund for Victims, which plays an essential role in ensuring reparations and assistance to thousands of victims. We continue to provide funding for the Trust Fund and call on states, parties, and others to contribute to this important endeavor. Finally, we take this opportunity to welcome Armenia as a new state party and to commend Ukraine for recently depositing its instrument of ratification. We look forward to welcoming Ukraine as our 125th state party as of 1st January 2025. I thank you.
Je vous remercie de votre déclaration.
Thank you very much for your statement. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Vicente Mateo Zamora, the Ambassador of Andorra to the Netherlands. You have the floor, sir. Madam Vice President of the Assembly of States Parties, Ministers, Ambassadors, Excellencies, it is an honor for me to speak to you today on the occasion of the 23rd session of the Assembly of States Parties of the International Criminal Court. The international context is disrupted on many fronts, and at this point we see that the entire future of the institution, which is so essential, is at a critical juncture. Since its creation 22 years ago, the court has benefited from the constant and determined support of Andorra. We see the court as a cornerstone of the international criminal justice system. We are convinced that there can be no lasting reconciliation or genuine peace, be it nationally or internationally, without justice. We believe the court not only as an institution of law, but also as a beacon of hope for the countless victims who aspire to seeing reparations, and for those societies that are seeking to rebuild themselves after devastating atrocities. The court is facing major challenges, and in light of this, we reiterate our full support to the court. It's the only standing international criminal jurisdiction that is universal in its mission. We support it and its work. We insist on the need to protect the court from all sorts of external pressures or threats. And this is why on the 14th of June, Andorra, through its permanent mission in the United Nations in New York, aligned itself with a declaration of support for the ICC, which was tabled by Belgium, Chile, Slovenia, Jordan, and Senegal. And by participating in this, we wanted to express our attachment to the court as an independent, impartial body. As the Rome Statute reminds us, atrocious crimes that deeply mark the human conscience are not something of the past. They continue to happen before our very eyes. Andorra would like to state in the strongest possible terms that those responsible for these crimes should be brought to justice. And if national jurisdictions cannot or will not take action, it falls to the ICC to fulfill this mission. Andorra's commitment to justice can be seen in particular in its constant support for the Trust Fund for Victims, to which we've contributed since 2008. And this year, Andorra's contribution will help finance programs for survivors of gender violence and sexual violence. This policy of international cooperation is in line with Objective 5.2 of the Sustainable Development Goals, which seeks to eliminate all forms of violence against women and girls. My country is convinced that the International Criminal Court represents an opportunity for international society to improve itself, and that's why we should continue to support it tirelessly. The objective of universality of the Rome Statute is something that merits further pursuit, and we should do everything we can to promote that. We also hail the recent ratification of the Statute of Rome by Ukraine. Andorra would also like to call on all nations to respect the authority of the court and to abide by their obligations under this statute, in particular when it comes to enforcing arrest warrants and providing logistical support when necessary. Article 86 of the Rome Statute clearly states the general obligation of states parties to cooperate fully with the investigations and the prosecutions of the crimes before the court. And lastly, we would like to stress the importance of multilingualism within a court as a truly universal body. Multilingualism guarantees the rights of victims, it facilitates cooperation with national authorities, and it strengthens the efficacy of investigations for international crimes. A multilingual court is a fairer court and a more inclusive court. To conclude, each state party to the Rome Statute is a critical link in the long chain that can only work that works only with the participation of one and all. Thank you very much.
Excellence, Monsieur l'Ambassadeur.
Thank you, Your Excellency, Ambassador. Thank you for that statement. I should now give the floor to Her Excellency, Madam Caroline Kitana Chipeta, the Ambassador of Tanzania to the Netherlands. You have the floor, dear colleague.
You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, at the outset, I would like to join other delegations to commend you, the two Vice Presidents, the entire Bureau and its working groups, as well as the Secretariat, for the tireless efforts in ensuring that the Assembly continues to fulfill its role of providing management oversight to the Court. My delegation also recognizes the Netherlands' continued efforts as the host country in providing supportive environments for efficient functioning of the court. Its leadership in organizing the ambassadors' retreat with the principals of the ICC in October this year is commendable. The retreat was a crucial forum for fostering dialogue, collaboration, and shared understanding among state parties. We wish to applaud the newly elected members of the Advisory Committee on Nomination of Judges, members of the Board of Directors of the Trust Fund for Victims, and members of the Committee on Budget and Finance, and particularly Ms. Glory Geoffrey Sindilo from Tanzania. While wishing them success in dispensation of their mandates, I would like to reiterate Tanzania's continued support and cooperation on their functions. Madam President, Tanzania recognizes consultation efforts undertaken by Belgium, the focal point on the preparations for the review of the Kampala amendments on the crime of aggression. However, to ensure inclusiveness, particularly given the limited number of state parties that have ratified the amendments, in the lead up to the review in July 2025, greater sensitization and awareness-raising efforts are essential. It is in this respect that my delegation lauds the Africa Legal Aid and the government of Switzerland for organizing the retreat for the African State Parties Minister responsible for ICC matters in Johannesburg, South Africa, in October 2024. The retreat did not only provide a platform to voice the African perspective, but also signified a growing commitment among African state parties to engage meaningfully with the ICC. It raised awareness and fostered a sense of ownership among African state parties to advocate for a crime of aggression regime that is both objective and authentic. Tanzania is proud to have been represented and played an active role in the retreat, both from the government and expert perspective. While Honorable Professor Kabudi, Minister for Constitutional and Legal Affairs, chaired the panel on amending the Kampala amendments, Professor Chris Maina Peter, the Professor of Law at the University of Dar es Salaam, an immediate past member of the UN International Law Commission, made a presentation on the crime of aggression provisions in the ICC statute, myths and mischiefs. We look forward to continue these discussions at the technical working group established by African state parties on amendment proposals. Nevertheless, the discussions need to be sustained and synergized with other related initiatives. We believe the side event co-sponsored by Ghana, Malawi, Sierra Leone, Switzerland, and AFLA, entitled Review of the Kampala Amendments on the Crime of Aggression, Perspective of African State Parties, that took place yesterday evening, played a crucial role in maintaining and enhancing the interaction. Madam President, my delegation welcomes the report on the activities of the court and wishes to acknowledge significant strides made in the global fight against impunity. Completion of implementation of judiciary-ordered reparations program in the Katanga case for the first time is a significant achievement to the courts and to the state parties. In this regard, we wish to applaud the Trust Fund for Victims for its continued commitment to fulfilling its dual mandate of implementing court-ordered reparations and providing broader assistance programs to victims and their communities. Further, my delegation would like to commend all the donors who make it possible for the Trust Fund to operate. We urge state parties, international organizations, and other entities to keep making voluntary contributions to enable the fund to continue in the coming years. Madam President, while celebrating these achievements, we also recognize the security challenges facing the court. In this respect, we wish to encourage the court to remain steadfast in its work despite the unprecedented threats. We call upon all state parties to enhance their cooperation and support. Madam President, Tanzania is committed to supporting a budget that enables the court to effectively and efficiently deliver on its mandate. However, we are concerned about the court's budgetary trajectory, which has seen a consistent increase over the past 3 years. This trend has raised questions about the court's financial sustainability, efficiency, and cost management. Considering this year's outstanding contributions, Tanzania will be able to support a budget that observes the difficult financial realities. We therefore emphasize on the importance of the resources allocated to the court to be appropriated in a manner that not only ensures proper utilization, but also promotes and maintains confidence of the member states. Madam President, Tanzania welcomes the report of the Bureau on Equitable Geographical Representation and Gender Balance on staff recruitment. We commend the facilitator for GRGB, the Republic of Uganda, and the court for the progress achieved towards creating more inclusive representation of both genders and nationalities in the court. Since imbalance endures despite the significant stride, we urge the court to continue its efforts to narrow the gap between overrepresented, underrepresented, and non-represented state parties. GRGB ensures diversity of perspective, which internally increases creativity in the working environment and externally remains to address perception challenges and advancing universality of the statute. Madam President, Tanzania acknowledges completion of the mandate of the review mechanism as a landmark success in the ongoing efforts to strengthen the court. We commend the mechanism for its dedicated work in assessing, facilitating implementation of the independent expert review recommendations. The recommendations have provided a structured pathway to enhance the court's efficiency and accountability, as well as broader Rome Statute framework. The dynamic leadership of the co-facilitators, Ambassador Paul van den Eyssel and Ambassador Michael Kanu, significantly contributed to advancing critical dialogues that remain engaged in addressing implementation of the outstanding recommendations. We take note of the annual report of the head of independent oversight mechanism and welcome the efforts in developing an evaluation policy for the court. We believe the policy will not only reinforce and solidify evaluation mandate of the court, but also promote transparency, impartial, and accountability. We equally acknowledge efforts by the court to uphold high standards of professionalism in its operations. A robust and professional working culture within the court is fundamental to the realization of its mandate and maintenance of public trust. In conclusion, Madam President, the United Republic of Tanzania reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the work of the ICC and its broader mission to deliver justice to victims of international crimes. Let us all continue to support this vital institution, ensuring that it remains a beacon of hope and justice for victims worldwide. I thank you, Madam President.
Excellency, thank you very much for your statement. Et maintenant, je donne la parole à son...
And I now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Daifla Al-Daifa Al-Fayez, the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Jordan to the Netherlands. You have the floor, sir.
Vice President, Excellencies,
السيدة نائبة الرئيسة, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to start my statement by thanking you, Madam Vice President and the President, and I'd like to thank the President of the ICC, the prosecutor, the registrar, the judges, and the staff of the ICC for the excellent work they're doing to serve the noble causes of the court. Our meeting today comes at a juncture where wars and conflicts are on the rise, and especially in the Middle East, we see an unprecedented level of crimes against mankind and humanity. This is truly embodied and manifested in the war, the unjust war by Israel in the Gaza Strip. Tens of thousands of dead and injured among civilians, millions displaced and starved. All forms of life and hope are destroyed. Of course, without forgetting the crimes of Israel against Lebanon and the atrocities committed by settler gangs against our Palestinian people in the occupied West Bank. What we see today are people who think they are above the law, immune from prosecution, in spite of their heinous crimes. However, this makes us more determined to stick to the principles of the Court and the Statute of Rome, which we hope will help to make justice prevail in accordance with the international law and international humanitarian law. My country supports the court in dealing with impunity in line with the principles of the Rome Statute. However, we believe that what weakens these principles is the double standards in the implementation of these criteria, including the violations of international law and the violation of the legitimate rights of people to determine their fate and an end to the occupation of its territory. We cannot say we achieve justice without a remedy for the victims and reparations, and without punishing those responsible for these crimes. This can only lead to restoring credibility of international institutions led by the ICC, and we must not forget that over the past 20 years we have built this edifice and is facing the acid test more than before. Ladies and gentlemen, my country will continue to support the court to enable it to continue this work and to meet its mandate. We will continue to work actively in the meetings of the Assembly and other bodies in order to make the work of this court more efficient, more effective, in a way that will enable us to achieve the goals of the statutes. Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand witness to a crime that is being committed in different chapters on Palestinian territory. There are criminals who brag about how they break international law and humanitarian principles. And I believe this is where the real work of this court should come into play before evidence is buried with the ashes of destruction. What we are seeing now is a crime without punishment, a criminal without being held accountable, a bleak world where there is no peace and security, and there is lack of confidence in the international legal institutions. My country reiterates the importance of the work of the prosecutor and his team to continue to investigate the crimes committed by Israel against the Palestinian people and to finish this job as quickly as possible, especially the most recent crimes on all Palestinian territories, especially since the inception of this court. And we look forward to see this court holding the perpetrators responsible and remedy for the victims. Thank you, Madam President.
Excellence, je vous remercie de votre déclaration.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to His Excellency Mario Javier Agustin y Oyarzabal, the Ambassador of the Argentine Republic to the Netherlands. Madam Vice President, first allow me to congratulate you on your election to the Vice Presidency as well as the President on her election to the Presidency. I am sure that your leadership will be essential at this decisive moment for international criminal justice. The Republic of Argentina extends our best wishes for every success as you carry out your duties. It's an honor for me to represent the Argentine Republic at this assembly in an international context that requires solid and balanced responses to the most urgent challenges that we face in the area of criminal justice. We would reiterate our commitment to fight against impunity for those guilty of such crimes under the everlasting guidance of the principles of justice, independence, and impartiality. Madam President, Allow me to address some points that are of particular interest to my country at this session. The situation in Venezuela requires immediate attention. We deeply regret the lack of substantive progress in the investigation that the prosecutor's office is carrying out. Following last July 28th elections, the circumstances in the country have gotten much worse. Venezuela cannot be considered a state based on the rule of law. Human rights and civil rights are systematically violated, and the democratic will of the people of Venezuela has been deliberately ignored. There are arbitrary detentions, inhumane treatment, and serious violations of fundamental rights. All of these require rigorous and comprehensive investigations that are on a par with the expectations we all have when it comes to international justice. Our diplomatic mission in Caracas has been under siege by police forces and armed unidentified agents as well, because we've offered asylum to those people who feel that their lives are in danger. At present, the headquarters of our embassy and those asylum seekers who are sheltering there are under the protection of Brazil, a country to which we express our gratitude. However, it is imperative that the inviolability of our diplomatic missions be respected, and that as a matter of urgency, safeguards be granted to those seeking asylum in our embassy. We urge the court to act with determination to make sure that those responsible for these crimes be brought to justice. Impunity not only perpetuates the suffering of the victims, but it also undermines the very foundations of the international legal order. Madam President, when it comes to the arrest warrants that have been issued against high officials of Israel, the Argentine Republic, in full respect of the independence of the court, would like to express its disagreement. We believe that greater depth of analysis should have been provided when it comes to the context in which Israel is exercising its legitimate right to defend itself against continuous attacks that are perpetrated by terrorist organizations. The tragical events that rolled out on the 7th of October 2023 constitute an act of violence without precedence in recent history, and certainly the most lethal attack against Jews since the Holocaust. Hostages have been taken, mass murder took place, and deliberate attacks against civilians were also planned. And these are crimes that should be condemned in strongest possible terms. Argentina reaffirms Israel's inalienable right to protect its people, to defend itself, and to preserve its sovereignty, and guarantees existence as a state against external threats. We would urge that the court give fair treatment, balanced treatment to this case in light of the context and the gravity of the attacks against Israel perpetrated by terrorist groups such as Hamas and Hezbollah, which are supported by state actors. Madam President, Argentina ratifies its commitment to the principles enshrined in the Rome Statute. We shall continue to lend our support to the efforts of this court so that crimes will be investigated and those responsible will be punished to the fullest extent of the law. And at the same time, we defend the right of democratic nations to protect themselves against existential threats and to guarantee the safety of their citizens. This is a joint effort. All states parties should stand together as we face the inherent challenges to the international criminal justice system, and the court must continue strengthening itself in order to achieve justice that is genuine, impartial, and effective. Only with balanced and impartial results that accommodate all the complexities that come into play in each case that comes before it, we can strengthen the confidence in this institution and consolidate the principles of international law. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you for that statement, Excellency. I give you the floor now to Mr. Boubacar Siddiq Diarra, Secretary General of the Ministry of Justice and Human Rights for Mali. You have the floor, Excellency. Madam President, Mali cooperates with the ICC, not only with respect to the pertinent provisions of the Rome Statute, but also on the basis of the legal cooperation agreements with the Office of the Prosecutor signed on the 13th of February 2013, together with a protocol agreed regarding the conditions for installation and work of the ICC on Mali soil dated 5th of September 2014. We need to keep in mind that there are two agreements, the first covering immunities and privileges, ratified on the 8th of July 2004, and the second on the execution of sentences signed on the 13th of January 2012. The TFV has been implemented in accordance with the chairperson's guidelines and the Timbuktu Agreement. We've carried out its principles in the north of the country. We applaud the decision to condemn Al-Assad for certain war crimes and other crimes against humanity, and we also need to continue to focus on the state of victims. Ladies and gentlemen, the government of Mali wants to combat impunity effectively, and that is why we have strengthened our legal framework as well as our institutions to combat criminality in all its forms. On the one hand, we've done it by the inclusion in our criminal code of the crimes that are covered by the Rome Statute, and also by creating a specialized judicial unit that focuses on the fight against terrorism and transnational organized crime. It's exercising its duties in that regard and has a specialized unit as well that covers cybercrime. We need to keep in mind the close linkages between cybercriminality and war crimes. These different areas are made up of or covered by specialized judges that are supported by the police and other entities and individuals who are specialized in researching these fields. And my country is happy to share our experience here. This center focuses on terrorism and transnational crime. It has started several procedures to defend the principles of the Rome Statute. Legislatively speaking, our National Assembly on the 31st of October 2024 has adopted a new criminal code and a new code for criminal procedures. We have now criminalized the crimes that are covered by the ICC and as foreseen in the Rome Statutes, and we also foresee procedures to refer matters. This includes also items such as the right to defense, electric bracelets, terrorism, the financing of terrorism, any apology of terrorism, slavery, putting an end to statutes of limitations to some of the crimes covered by Rome. We also want to emphasize that this specialized legal center that covers terrorism and transnational crime opens cases systematically when it comes to human rights violations or related violations of international humanitarian law. Madam President, the preamble of Rome illustrates the importance of the principle of complementarity, since the court cannot cover the planet on its own. It is therefore the duty of every state, as is enshrined in the Rome Statute, to submit in its legal jurisdiction those who are authors of crimes. Mali is part of this logic of complementarity and upholds it, and has also already led to excellent results, as has been reported by the prosecutor in his opening statement in previous sessions. Also, Mali will always remind us all that the mission of the ICC is sacred, and it needs to represent a bulwark against criminality and human atrocities. It is not to be a jurisdiction with political connotations, as some delegations have mentioned, including Moldova. When it comes to the ambiguities of the Rome Statute, that is always pertinent, because a text can be measured only with the test of time and as it serves countries. However, we need to look at why it was created. It needs to reassure the world with its sentences and not bow to the strong or take sides in global geopolitics. It needs to have as its cornerstone fairness. That is its health. That will be its respectability, its credibility. That is what it's based on. Thank you.
Je vous remercie.
Thank you for your statement. I give the floor now to His Excellency Alvaro Enrique González Ortero, the ambassador from Uruguay to the Netherlands. You have the floor, Excellency.
Gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Authorities of the Court, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, representatives of civil society. During the course of this year, the International Criminal Court celebrated the 22nd anniversary of the entry into force of the Statute of Rome and the 26th anniversary since it was adopted. The global context is urging us ever more to strengthen and defend the pillars of international law, and in this context, the Rome Statute continues to be a cardinal instrument in our collective search for justice and accountability. Uruguay once again expresses its firm commitment to the International Criminal Court and with the Rome Statute system in its fight against impunity for those who are responsible for the most serious international crimes, and also in its work to prevent these heinous crimes. Madam Vice President, it's in this spirit that Uruguay has been an active participant in all efforts to improve and strengthen the Rome Statute system. It's our understanding that effective and proper functioning of the court can only be guaranteed with due cooperation from the state's parties, which enables the work of the court to advance smoothly. And for this, it's necessary for all states parties to adopt in their national legislation those measures necessary governing cooperation with the court and also make domestic law the statute's mandates. In the case of Uruguay, we have a very forward-looking law of cooperation with the ICC. It is a comprehensive piece of legislation because it not only brings together the legal obligations undertaken at international level, but it also provides for national mechanisms of cooperation between our national authorities and the various bodies of the court in their entirety. This is set forth in a national participatory process to nominate candidates to the position of either judge or prosecutor. For example, in 2023, Uruguay deposited its instrument of ratification for all of the amendments to the Rome Statute when it comes to war crimes, as well as that relating to the elimination of Article 124 of the statute on the disposition of transition, therefore broadening the scope of the treaty. And it's in this connection that Uruguay would respectfully call on states party to ratify the relevant amendments in order to strengthen the mandate and effectiveness of the court. Madam Vice President, today, now more than ever, We need explicit political support from all states parties to the independent and impartial work of the court, especially in a very complex multilateral complex where we're facing numerous challenges that threaten international peace and security across all of the regions of the world, without exceptions, including in my own part of the world. And here I'm referencing the situation in Venezuela. And this is why, more than 20 years after the signing of the Treaty of Rome, Uruguay reiterates its commitment to multilateralism and respect for international law. We will continue to provide constructive support to the review process of the Rome Statute. This process should be inclusive. It should focus on improving the working methods of the International Criminal Court, thereby increasing its efficiency and efficacy, while at the same time respecting the judicial independence of the court and the office of the prosecutor. Madam Vice President, we're grateful for the work done by the Office of the Prosecutor, which reflects the full force and relevance of the Rome Statute in the current international situation. In all the areas of the court's work, Uruguay reiterates the importance of the principle of fair geographical representation and appropriate representation of the various legal systems in the world, as well as the need to bear in mind the diversity of cultural contexts, gender balance, and the proper technical competence within the various positions and the staff of the system. And this is why we would like to stress the important role of the registry in order to ensure that this court works effectively and efficiently. Here, Uruguay would also like to stress the need of making more special advisors made available from the Latin America and Caribbean group. It's our understanding that by improving cultural diversity at all levels, we will be enhancing the robustness of the prosecutor's office. Now, we have reflected upon the great complexities that we're facing today. We can anticipate that 2025 will be a year of an increasing number of challenges for the court. And this is why it's important to make sure that each state party is committed to providing its financial contribution to the court within the established deadlines so that we have a foreseeable and predictable financial flow. Madam Vice President, I would just like to say that when it comes to the defense of international principles of international law and human rights in my region, we must make sure that we can pull together in my regulation where democracy, institutional stability, the rule of law, peace, and international cooperation are fundamental pillars of peaceful coexistence in our region. And this is why we've been following very closely and are deeply concerned at the humanitarian and institutional crisis that is unfolding in Venezuela. This is why last September our country referred the situation to the Office of the Prosecutor under Article 14 of the Rome Statute so that the OTP can carry out an investigation and, where appropriate, can take the necessary steps that apply in light of its findings. Unfortunately, instead of the situation getting better, the situation is getting worse, as we've seen in absolute clarity in the most recent report developed by the International Independent Fact-Finding Mission on the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela, which was submitted to the United Nations Council on Human Rights, and I can refer you all to the conclusions contained in that report. What's at stake is the freedom, physical integrity, and the very lives of hundreds of people, including women and minors. It's now urgent for the prosecutor's office and the court itself to take action in order to investigate this and put an end to the repression and the arbitrary detentions that have been taking place in Venezuela. Madam Vice President, one of the most important things that we need to do to strengthen the Rome Statute system is to achieve full universality. And this is why we call on all those states not yet parties to become so as quickly as possible. This guarantees a standing universal jurisdiction to try those cases involving the most serious international crimes. It also gives everybody guidance in developing their own national criminal legislation. We would welcome those states that have ratified the statute over the past year. In a similar vein, we also hail the signing of the Ljubljana, the Hague Convention on International Cooperation when it comes to investigating and prosecuting the crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes. This is a new instrument of international law that, along with the Rome Statute, seek to provide us with the tools for a world of greater justice and greater peace. Madam Vice President, we must keep our eyes on the victims at all times. They are central point of the whole Rome Statute. And this is why we should make sure that their rights are upheld, their rights throughout all the procedures, and their right to reparations. And here we would stress the important work done by the Trust Fund for Victims. Uruguay would also like to express its gratitude to the variety of CSOs that flank the court, help it carry out its work. And we would stress the importance of having effective communication between the court, states parties, and civil society in their entirety. We would call, say, a word of greetings to those outgoing officers, those incoming, and we are appreciative of the efforts of the Assembly's Secretariat in making all the provisions for this session of the ASP. 2025 will be a year of particular relevance because we'll be carrying out evaluation exercises and perhaps even updating some of the provisions of the statute that refer to the crime of aggression. Uruguay is committed to being a constructive participant in all of these discussions. And lastly, we would reiterate our firm commitment to the work of the court. After 22 years of existence, the court has consolidated itself as an indispensable institution for those who believe in a world run on a rules-based orientation, upholding the values enshrined in this statute. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that statement, Excellency. I give the floor now to His Excellency Ms. Ramatoulaye Bafai, Ambassador of Senegal to the Netherlands. You have the floor, Madam. Madam Ambassador. Madam President of the ASP, ambassadors, representatives of civil society, esteemed participants. Just like those who took the floor before me, on behalf of my country, Senegal, I'd like to reiterate my warmest congratulations towards Madame Tomoko Kanane, President of the ICC, for her election at the helm of the august body, as well as the new judges elected in December 2023. I would also like to express my deepest gratitude to the entire ICC staff, especially Mr. Khan, prosecutor, and many of my compatriots and fellow citizens that are working on many continents with commitment and professionalism to fulfill the mission to combat impunity against those who commit mass atrocities. My delegation will also like to seize this opportunity to reiterate its support to Madame Kokoranta, President of the Assembly of State Parties, and salute her leadership, as well as her professionalism, which have allowed for a smooth running of the Bureau's activities, of which my country is a member. Madam President, the current situation in the Gaza Strip and on the West Bank, occupied West Bank, put international humanitarian law to the test, with more than 44,000 deaths in a few months, mostly women and children. The powerlessness of the international community to put an end to the conflict is a stain on the conscience of humanity, keeping in mind the terrible tragedy that has not had a precedent since the Second World War. Senegal reiterates its firm condemnation of the serious violations of international humanitarian law committed in Gaza and everywhere else on the occupied Palestinian territory, and invites Israel to stop targeting civilians and infrastructure. Madam President, the creation of the ICC had led to real hope to put an end to the impunity for authors of mass crimes. It represents today, without the slightest shadow of a doubt, the most important part of the fight to make international criminal justice thrive and international law grow. In an international context that is marked by the resurgence of armed conflicts in many parts of the world and the emergence of new challenges that could also generate serious human rights violations, the International Criminal Court is now more than ever an essential pillar for the global architecture to promote peace and security. Through the fight against impunity, the court represents a symbol of hope for all the victims of atrocities on a mass scale. As first and only international criminal jurisdiction that is standing in nature, the court needs to continue to uphold the hope for a better world free of large-scale crime. We see with deep regret that the past century has been especially terrible for humanity, with hundreds of millions of children, men and women who've lost their lives during armed conflicts, massacres, and oppressions. This black history should not repeat itself. It is the responsibility and the moral obligation of the international community with at its helm the UN Security Council to prevent any repeat. Madam President, we have firm conviction in the ICC's principles, its goals and ideals. That is why Senegal was the first country to deposit on the 2nd of February 1999 at the level of the Secretary General of the UN its instruments of ratification for the Rome Statute. It is this commitment of the Senegalese authorities that has been built on over the years, thanks to the strong contribution of the court to strengthening the emergence of international criminal justice and repression for international crimes and the assistance provided to victims. It remains essential to emphasize that the preamble to the Rome Statute, which creates the ICC, reminds us all as state parties that we have the shared will to reach several goals, including that of putting an end to impunity of those who commit the most grave crimes, but also to advise, to prevent the commission of such acts, including through dissuasive measures. My delegation is convinced that the ICC is not a political body, but rather an international criminal law body that needs to guarantee international peace and security. Thus it is that Senegal wishes to reaffirm its unfailing support to the court as a legal institution that is independent and impartial for the proper fulfillment of its mission. Madam President, in the current context in which the court is subject to attacks, and we note threats and intimidations against its judges, prosecutors, and so forth, in their efforts to make Rome universal, needs to be highlighted. Similarly, my delegation condemns in the strongest of terms those acts whose purpose would be to prevent the court from fulfilling said mission. Furthermore, it's crucial to emphasize that the court does not want to replace national courts. Complementarity needs to be our guiding light, our backbone for the ICC. The Rome Statute created a new international legal system according to which national jurisdictions of state parties have the responsibility to investigate crimes that are covered by the ICC and to judge their perpetrators. That is why the statement and words of the former Secretary General of the UN, Mr. Kofi Annan, are so important. In his report in 2004, he said, "The court exercises already an important effect by serving as a catalyst for the advancement of national laws against the most serious international crimes." End of quote. So as to give the principle of complementarity all its weight, the court needs to strengthen its partnerships and provide capacity building at a national level. We need to contribute to the fight against impunity and make sure that the gravest of crimes do not remain unpunished and that international law is respected. The ICC is a body of last resort, which can judge crimes of genocide, crimes against humanity, and war crimes when national legal systems, for any reasons, cannot do so themselves or do not want to do so. We are convinced of the need to combat effectively against impunity, and that is why my delegation believes that we need to have a credible legal framework which will facilitate prosecution of those who commit mass atrocities, but we also need to develop national capacities with respect to investigations and prosecution through the avenue of complementarity. That is why Senegal is participating in the mutual legal assistance and extradition efforts together with Argentina, Belgium, Mongolia, the Netherlands, and Slovenia. This has led to the adoption and signature in February 2024 of the draft convention Ljubljana-Hague, so that there would be further international cooperation when it comes to investigating crimes against humanity and war crimes, as well as genocide. My delegation invites all states, especially state parties, to adhere to this multilateral instrument so as to combat impunity. Madam President, Senegal considers that the implementation of the provisions of the Rome Statute depends to a large extent on the quality of cooperation between state parties and the court. Mindful of this fact, my country has committed itself, together with France, to guarantee the co-facilitation of the working group charged with following this issue. For the court to accomplish its mission, we require honest cooperation. Forgive me, Your Excellency, but I'd ask you to wrap up, please, interrupts the Vice President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the delegation is pleased with all the advances carried out by the TFV and the reparation decisions taken by the court and the support given to victims. To conclude, my delegation wants to reaffirm its attachment to the principles of equitable geographic representation in the different bodies created by the Rome Statute of Rome, multilingualism, and respect for the different systems throughout the world. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup de votre...
Thank you very much for your statement. Let me just remind the representatives to strictly observe the allotted speaking time. I will now give the floor to the next speaker, His Excellency Leopold Tongwenoma Monkungu, the ambassador to Belgium of Burkina Faso. Thank you, Madam Vice President. With your leave, I will be reading out the national statement of Burkina Faso. Madam Vice President, on behalf of the delegation of Burkina Faso, congratulate you on your election to the Vice Presidency. Congratulations also go out to the President on her election to the presidency of the 23rd session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute. And you can count on my delegation's support, as can the members of the Bureau. Madam President, distinguished representatives, Burkina Faso reiterates its deep attachment to the principles of the Rome Statute and the fight against impunity for the most serious crimes that shock human conscience. This session is taking place at a time in which the international community the international context is posing serious challenges to the court, including most importantly, in its fight against impunity for serious violations of human rights. Burkina Faso praises the work of the court. It plays a critical role as a watchtower when it comes to keeping different regions of the world safe from atrocities and other serious crimes that fall within the jurisdiction of the court. And this is why my country reiterates support to the court. We also stress the importance of its independence, its impartiality, and the respect of the principles of sovereign equality of states and non-interference in the domestic affairs. It's out of respect for these principles and by allaying any suspicions of partiality or selectiveness in addressing documented situations of serious violations of human rights, that the court can build trust amongst the state's parties. Distinguished representatives, Madam President, Burkina Faso for several years now has been facing a situation of violence in which attacks are carried out by terrorist and criminal groups without any cause, willy-nilly, harming women, children, indiscriminately, causing loss of human life, forced displacements of peaceful populations towards areas that are safer. And thanks to the tireless efforts of the government and its very deeply held sense of responsibility to protect the population without any discrimination whatsoever, thanks to all of this, I say, significant progress has been made in securing our national territory. Madam President, despite this security and humanitarian crisis that has taken a serious toll on the economy and the finances of Burkina Faso, the country nonetheless has continued to do everything it can to cooperate with the court. This is why this year it has brought itself up to date in settling its financial obligations vis-à-vis the court. Moreover, bearing in mind the fact that the responsibility of each state, its prime responsibility, is to protect its population against the most serious crimes. In light of this, my country has introduced legal and institutional changes into our judicial system in order to address these concerns. These stand as testimony of our attachment to the principle of complementarity. Moreover, I can reiterate as well the willingness of Burkina Faso to strengthen its cooperation with the court, as we've done in the past, and in particular through visits of the legal representative of victims in Burkina Faso. The next such mission in Burkina Faso will take place where the legal representative of the victims in the case of the prosecutor versus Al-Hassan Abdul Aziz Ahmad is scheduled to take place between the 8th and 20th of December 2024. Madam President, my delegation believes that the court, which acts in an international environment with a variety of different and extremely complex challenges, has to bear in mind the viewpoint and the recommendations of the state's parties seeking to reconcile the imperative of justice with the imperative of peace. This is why my delegation believes that the court should continue its reforms in order to be an indispensable organization for the international community in its quest for justice, peace, and collective security. Thank you very much.
Je vous remercie.
Many thanks. I give the floor to Mr. Tyler Lubanga, Charge de Mission for the DRC. You have the floor. Madam Vice President, Madam President of the ASP, Mr. Prosecutor, Registrar. The Democratic Republic of Congo, a country that I have the privilege of representing in this important meeting, the 23rd ASP, has charged me with congratulating your Bureau and the organizers for the work they've carried out, and at the same time, we need to realize that there are complex challenges ahead of us for the court to move forward in harmony, but an attitude that also can work in the midst of attacks. My country is one of the countries that has transferred its situation to the ICC. That is why our head of state, Félix Antoine, has charged me with conveying his warm salutations as well as that of his government. And we want to reiterate our full commitment to the ideals of the ICC. The assembly that opens today includes state parties to the Rome Statute, which gives body to our court, observer states, international organizations, be they regional or more broad, representatives of civil society, but also other persons interested that are invited by the court via its General Assembly. These representatives will debate different matters and make important decisions and resolutions on decisions that challenge the statute. There will be issues of amendments related to the main amendment, the main Kampala amendment on the crimes of aggression. And on that issue, we have a very clear position. We do not want states to create a criminal paradise, and we don't want any immunity for aggressors. My country would like to recognize the important work carried out by the Bureau in recent years, the investigations that have been opened in Ukraine, in Lebanon, against important people. And my country would like these investigations to complete themselves and encourages the prosecutor to hold firm and to bring the decisions forward. Regarding the decision of the 15th of October 2024 regarding my country, we would like to see the work of the prosecutor with the support of all countries here take note of the degradation of the situation and speed up the investigation. Why? Because to date, my country is a victim of a war of aggression carried out by Rwanda. The question you could ask yourself is, can a small country such as Rwanda attack a big country like mine? The response is clear. It's a war by proxy, using the resources of criminal organizations that try to access the wealth of resources of our country. My country's request is to have the prosecutor take the necessary measures, keep in mind this degraded reality of displaced peoples, of death and of violence, of the rape of women, of children that are separated from their parents, and to provide justice to victims. We want the community of states that believe in the humanist values we espouse, that they take an important decision. We have resolutions presented to the prosecutor's office that have asked for sped-up investigations and assign responsibility so that those who can benefit from local immunities can be addressed for the benefit of the justice that we all signed when we adhered to the Rome Statute. My country also aligns itself with the efforts of states such as Vanuatu, Fiji, the independent state of Samoa, to add to our criminal code some of the most important crimes, that attack the environment, because we consider the environment to be a key value, and the barbaric management of the environment, if that is continued, humanity will be in a difficult position. And we are amongst those that believe we need to address these crimes as they're included in the Rome Statute. And that is precisely the reason why we will be present, and we invite other stakeholders to future discussions to give the proper direction and approach to these crimes. Madam Vice President, my country believes that the ICC deserves the respect of all countries, and this support can be provided through two pillars: cooperation and complementarity. Cooperation is necessary because the court cannot act within the states. They don't have a police force. The states therefore need to provide what's necessary for the court to be able to accomplish its mission. And why is complementarity important? Simply because the court needs to have active states that do not sit on their hands in the face of crimes ongoing on their soil, and therefore they need to make the necessary efforts. That is why, Madam President, under the heading of national efforts, my country has set up, as of October 2024, a project to draft statutes that would create a special court in my country so that we could address these crimes at a local level. Forgive me, sir. You need to start wrapping up, please. To conclude, we invite donors to support the efforts made by the European Union so that my country can activate these mixed mechanisms that could allow us to combat the impunity of its most grave crimes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup de
Thank you so much for that statement. Once again, I urge you to respect the allotted time. Our list of speakers is still long. I will now invite His Excellency Mr. Skander Denguezi, Ambassador of Tunisia to the Netherlands. You have the floor, sir.
Merci, Madame.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, dear ambassadors, representatives of the States Party, representatives of civil society, dear participants, on the occasion of the 23rd session of the Assembly of States Parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and on behalf of the Republic of Tunisia, it is my honor to express to you my deepest thanks for all of the efforts undertaken in prosecuting and punishing international crimes that are of most serious concern, to wit, genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, and crimes of aggression. The role of the first international criminal jurisdiction is essential to put an end to the atrocities we see, to fight against the impunity of those responsible for mass crimes, and to provide justice to the victims and their families. In this connection, Tunisia welcomes the new states parties to the Statute of Rome. This stands as testimony to the universal nature of the court and its growing role in promoting international justice. We are very pleased to see this momentum of enlarging the family in the ICC system, which is essential in order to guarantee accountability and protection of human rights globally. The government of Tunisia also welcomes progress made in the investigations being carried out in situations in those countries that are alleged scenarios of international crimes, and in particular the investigation and the situation in the state of Palestine that has been suffering for more than a year now an operation of genocide by the Israeli occupation forces that have targeted in particular women and children. On the 21st of November 2024, the court has reaffirmed its commitment to protecting fundamental human rights and the promotion of international peace and security by issuing arrest warrants against the alleged culprits of the occupying forces for accusing them of crimes against humanity and crimes of war. The court has clearly said that there will no longer be any impunity for mass murderers. The Republic of Tunisia reiterates its deep attachment to international law on an egalitarian basis and welcomes all the efforts of states parties that seek to implement the provisions of international law in the interest of us all. I would also like to express my country's full support to the court, to its judges and its elected officials, as well as to its staff, against any form of intimidation or threat that would seek to stand in the way of their carrying out their functions in an independent and impartial fashion. I would also like to take this opportunity to recall the close cooperation between the court and the various agencies in Tunisia in order to uphold the respect and implement the principle of cooperation, which is critical for the work of the court. Allow me to express my gratitude to the various jurisdictional administrative units within the ICC, as well as the working groups that report to the Assembly, for all of their tireless commitment to making international justice a reality, preserving national memory, upholding programs for the victims, providing them with socioeconomic and psychological support, and also helping populations to learn the right lessons from the past. I wish you every success during this session. Thank you very much.
Many thanks for your statement, Excellency. I give the floor now to Mr. Ralph Regenevanu, Special Envoy for Climate Change from Vanuatu. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen, Vanuatu is proud to be here once again to address this august assembly. As a state which accords high priority to international law and the rules-based order, we remain committed to the International Criminal Court and the values it embodies. Our small nation ratified the Rome Statute in 2012, recognizing that strong institutions are essential in our collective endeavor to ensure justice for the worst crimes affecting the peace and security of humankind. Madam Vice President, the challenges facing the international community require cooperation across borders, and we believe that the Rome Statute system is uniquely placed to address such challenges. Vanuatu reiterates that respect for the rule of law is imperative to maintaining international stability and calls upon all nations to respect their Rome Statute obligations. In this regard, we highlight our wholehearted condemnation of recent attacks on the court and its officials. An independent and impartial judicial architecture should not be treated as optional or subject to political considerations. The ICC can count on Vanuatu's full support, as well as advocacy for universality of the Rome Statute in the Pacific and beyond. Vanuatu notes with interest the court's recent attention to the centrality of environmental crimes and harms to the commission of existing international crimes. We are encouraged by the Office of the Prosecutor's planned policy paper on the investigation and prosecution of environmental destruction within the existing scope of the Rome Statute. Vanuatu has long recognized the relevance of international criminal law to the environment. In the Assembly's 18th session in 2019, Vanuatu called upon state parties to seriously consider the criminalization of ecocide under the statute. Since our statement, the concept of ecocide law has gained considerable traction around the world. The law is now supported by many sectors and stakeholders, including national proposals in multiple jurisdictions and the recent criminalization of offences comparable to ecocide within the EU. In light of these developments, in September this year, Vanuatu, along with the nations of Fiji and Samoa, proposed inclusion of an independent crime of ecocide to this court's working group on amendments in order to fully address the worst causes of environmental harm, both in times of conflict and in peace. To adequately protect the environment, upon which all human rights ultimately depend, enforceable standards are required, as well as meaningful international cooperation through domestic, regional, and international spheres. The Rome Statute, as well as the fora provided by the International Criminal Court more generally, offer legitimate tools for ensuring effective collective action in this regard. While Vanuatu appreciates that this discussion is not one to approach lightly, we nonetheless warmly invite all state parties to engage positively with our proposal in the understanding that new tools may be required to face new challenges. To close, the Republic of Vanuatu reaffirms its unwavering commitment to the Rome Statute system and the fundamental importance of ensuring that the International Criminal Court is legally, politically, and financially equipped to discharge its crucial mandate. We urge all states to recognize the importance and the potential of the Rome Statute, both as it stands and as it may evolve. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for your intervention also, and thank you for respecting the time allocated to you. Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants.
Ladies and gentlemen, representatives, we have now concluded the statements by state party representatives. I thank all speakers for their statements and support pledged for the court, and for all the words of appreciation for the President. Ladies and gentlemen, representatives, are there any other countries that want to take the floor at this stage? Venezuela, you have the floor. Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I take the floor to exercise my right of reply for the mentions of Venezuela made by the prosecutor, Karim Khan, as well as of Panama, Argentina, and Uruguay, the representatives that we reject in full. Regarding the prosecutor, we reject the statements made regarding the situation in my country that were made yesterday in the framework of the ASP. The Venezuelan authorities have informed fully and in a timely way the court on all the measures that have been adopted internally so as to live up to the commitments enshrined in the Rome Statute, as well as everything covered in the two memorandums of understanding we have with the prosecutor. Thus it is that Venezuela is concerned that the prosecutor has not been informed of these advances and the exact stage of his information in the statements, which includes the reactivation of the Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights, his work in the on Venezuelan soil, which was recently reactivated. Sadly, we see that the prosecutor is getting carried away by social network information fed by the far right that try to reignite colonialist grievances. Our government extends a new invitation to the prosecutor to visit our country and to see with his own eyes the constructive approach we have with respect to our shared commitments. With respect to Argentina, we are saddened to see that the representatives of the government of Javier Milei try to hide their weaknesses by attacking others. And they do it not only by attacking Venezuela, but also by attacking the ICC, by attacking its ongoing procedures. Let us speak about human rights, Madam President. In Argentina, which is not suffering any sort of unilateral coercive measures, has over 50% poverty in the first semester of 2024. In other words, an increase of 11% when you compare it to the same semester in 2023, according to the National Census Bureau of the country. Milei's government left without free medicines many pensioners and does not provide food to soup kitchens and the most vulnerable. Thus it is that it's unacceptable that today's Argentina comes here and wrap itself in the principles of human rights to criticize us. It does not surprise us that it's the only country in the entire general debate of the ICC that has dared to call into question the arrest warrants that have been issued for the crimes committed in Palestine. Regarding Panama, we are saddened to see that our country uses this forum to voice its concerns. Panama has imposed at least 70 unilateral coercive measures against my country. Similarly, the President of Panama, José Raúl Molino, called in August of last year, after a visit from a U.S. authority, a failed summit for the region to address the problem. We would suggest to the government of Panama that they address the serious issues of corruption that are a problem for Panama, that make it a money laundering hub of the world, and also it needs to address its indigenous people's challenges. We would also invite Uruguay to look in the mirror and focus on transitions in its national context. We trust that the new government can hopefully be able to address the expansion in hate crimes that have been occurring on that soil and also the impact that it's had on the health of many people. Madam President, 2 of the 3 countries that have named us have also referred to the post-electoral situation of my country, fully aware of the fact that we had to deal with a violent context that created a lot of damage. 75 educational centers were destroyed, 41 health centers were set on fire. Many police units were also impacted. These are all criminal activities that led to 28 deaths and 190 wounded. From that basis, it's the challenge we face in Venezuela. But all of these delegations should actually be silent since they have their own human rights problems. Last but not least, Madam President, we will end this right of reply by saying how sad we are that we have to talk about politicization in this body, since precisely we are here to reject any sort of politicization. And therefore, we reject, once again, all the statements that are made against my country in this forum, because we are here to uphold the Rome Statutes, and this does not mean that we will renounce the defense of our sovereignty and our rights. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Merci.
Thank you. Is there any other delegation that would like to take the floor as a right of reply? Were that to be the case, please keep in mind that the number of statements that can be made in the context of a right of reply in any given session has to be limited to 2 per point on the agenda, 2 per item on the agenda. The delegation that uses the right of reply in any given session has to be limited to a 10-minute period. The second intervention has to be limited to 5 minutes. Are there any other requests for the floor on this issue of right of reply? I recognize Palestine. You have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. The State of Palestine is worried about some of the statements that were made from the floor in the general debate in regards to so-called Israel's right to self-defense. We reiterate that there is no right to commit genocide, there is no right to commit war crimes, there is no right to commit crimes against humanity. That's absolutely not a right. And while we're talking about this, we also regret some statements of which some states and states parties of which they say that they are not willing to cooperate with the court. And we reiterate the obligations of all states parties to cooperate with the court in regards to the arrest warrants issued in the situation in the state of Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I recognize Argentina. The same right to reply, yes? Thank you. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam President. When it comes to the most recent statement of the representative of Venezuela, I would like to go on record in stating my rejection of that statement altogether in all of its terms. The Argentine Republic is a state based on the rule of law, whose institutions are operating, and the government was elected democratically through elections that were carried out in a transparent manner. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I don't see any request for the floor. So let us move forward. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I recognize Panama. Yes, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. Panama rejects any statement that flies in the face of facts and accusations that are not based on facts. The most recent statements of Venezuela do not meet with our approval. We will reject all of the various irregularities that took place and reject them out of hand during the electoral process in Venezuela. Without interfering in the domestic affairs of the country, we would nonetheless call on the people's will to be respected, and the recent election results seem to favor the opposition. It's fundamental for all citizens to be able to exercise their civil and political rights without fearing reprisals, because respecting human rights is the only way to foster an environment of peace and stability. Let me just recall that more than 7.7 million people have left Venezuela seeking protection and a better life. Of them, more than 6.5 million of them have been welcomed by fellow kindred nations in Latin America and the Caribbean. And this is something that gives rise to deep concern in all of the peoples of the neighboring states. We are on the front line of a humanitarian crisis that is most serious. Thank you very much, Madam President, Vice President.
Thank you very much. Now I recognize Uruguay on my list. You have the floor, Ambassador.
Okay. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Madam Vice President. I should be very brief. I would simply like to... Can you hear me? Is my microphone working? The interpreter says that he can hear the speaker. I would like to reject everything that was stated by the representative of Venezuela when it comes to what he said about Uruguay. I would also like to go on record in recalling the following. Facts don't care about your feelings. And what people are talking about, if it's not backed up by facts, there's no reason for those things to be seen as justified. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now I recognize for the second time Venezuela. At the same time, I have the request by the interpreters that if you can speak a little bit slowly. Thank you very much. You have the floor.
Gracias, señora vice.
Thank you, Madam Vice President. And I will, of course, with great pleasure, speak more slowly. I'm taking the floor as of my right to reply to what was said by the representatives of Argentina, Panama, and Uruguay. We stand ready to provide facts to back up what we said. It's also very important to go on record in stating that the International Criminal Court, as far as I know, has no power, or there are no measures in force when it comes to inspecting or observing elections. The elections that have taken place in our country were fully accepted by Venezuelan citizens, the national associations, etc., and therefore it's intolerable and inappropriate for anybody to suggest that the court take a role in talking about our elections. We should remain focused on the Rome Statute, its objectives, its content, and everything that we need to do together to make sure that justice is possible at all times. Thank you.
Thank you. I don't see any other requests for the floor. Alors, on va continuer, mesdames.
So let's continue, ladies and gentlemen, on the basis of this previously Assembly decisions. The Bureau recommended that the Assembly allocate 45 minutes for the participation in the general debate of the observers pursuant to Article 92 of the Rules of Procedure of the Assembly. Therefore, we'll start with the delegation of Iran. His Excellency, Mr. Hadi Farayvad, Ambassador of Iran to the Netherlands. You have the floor.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the Compassionate, the Merciful. Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, I would like to express my sincere gratitude to Your Excellency, as well as the Bureau and the Secretariat of the Assembly of State Parties to the Rome Statute for preparation of the 23rd session and the related documents. Madam Vice President, the International Criminal Court has been entrusted with the critical responsibility of ensuring that perpetrators of the most egregious crimes under international law do not operate with impunity. The objective sought in conferring such a mandate upon the court emanates from the very idea that a certain serious crimes considered as delicta juris gentium deeply shock the conscience of humanity and thus require arrangements that, while being complementary to national jurisdiction, provide a framework to effectively persecute such crimes. Such an important responsibility instills strong expectation in the international community as a whole that the court should reject politicization, double standards, selectivity, and that the court, acting in accordance with its statute and international law, in particular, the fundamental principles of international law as enshrined in the United Nations Charter, should bring criminals to justice. This expectation, which is deeply rooted in the very aspiration sought in the establishment of the court, as reflected in the preamble of its statute, could never be more relevant than present time, when the horrific commission of crimes against humanity, war crimes and genocide against Palestinian people is deeply shocking and conscience of the world. The situation in Palestine is dire due to persistent brutal attacks of the Israeli regime that encompasses a broad range of serious crimes whose physical and mental elements are manifest. These widespread and systematic attacks have killed more than 42,000 Palestinians, including women and children, inflicted gross bodily harm to more than 90,000 people, leaving many in critical health condition or disabled for lifetime. The said regime continues to inflict severe conditions of life upon Palestinians while also forcibly displacing millions. It deliberately conducts attacks against the United Nations humanitarian centers, place of worship, hospital and other medical centers, and imposes starvation against Palestinians as a method of warfare. The situation in Palestine is catastrophic and unimaginable. Concerning the arrest warrant issued recently, the commission of all crimes of international concern, including war crimes, crimes against humanity, and in particular genocide, by the Israeli regime is beyond evident, an establishment fact which has not been fully addressed in the said warrants. Against this backdrop, the court's measure is a required first step which, if fully implemented, may contribute to ending impunity for crimes committed by Israeli perpetrators, which is a demand of conscience of humanity at this juncture. It goes without saying that double standards and selectivity, whether employed by some states or induced against the court, are no less compromising in the current regrettable failure to end the impunity of the said crimes. Claims of few on the importance of ending impunity and bringing perpetrators of international crimes to justice, while their governments actively aid and abet the Israeli regime in perpetration of egregious crimes against the Palestinian people or otherwise acquiesce in such crimes, is a clear, deplorable instance of double standards and selectivity. Such dishonest approaches adversely impact Palestinians who are victims of such crimes. Madam President, we reiterate that the independence and impartiality of the court, its judges and staff, and the exercise of their functions free from influence or external threat are essential for the sound administration of justice and cultivating confidence and trust in the institution. In a similar vein, we maintain that attacks on or threats against judges and the staff of the court, in particular, unlawful restrictive measures imposed against the prosecutor in some instances should be rejected, along with the unlawful attempts and unilateral coercive measures aimed at obstructing or impeding the work of the court regarding the commission of atrocious crime against Palestinians.
Distinguished representative, please, I would like to ask you kindly to try to conclude your speech. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The international community has a responsibility to establish justice and to prevent impunity. On that account, the Islamic Republic of Iran follows closely the work of the ICC. We also support the efforts of the international community to punish crimes of international concern and to establish conditions under which justice would prevail. I thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention.
Our next speaker is Ms. Ana Maria Ortega Baez from the Cuban Embassy. You have the floor, Madam. Thank you, Madam President. On behalf of the Observer Delegation of Cuba, I'd like to start by reemphasizing our commitment to the UN Charter and international law and our firm rejection to the impunity of crimes that affect the international community. We live in a complex international context with multiple conflicts that put peace and security of our countries in jeopardy. International humanitarian law is being violated clearly in many instances. We can look at the genocide that's being carried out with total impunity in the illegally occupied Palestinian territories. We require an international jurisdictional body that is truly independent, that can guarantee challenge to impunity of the most grave crimes. Cuba has serious reservations when it comes to the insufficient faculties given to the Security Council of the UN by virtue of Article 16 of the Rome Statute and its relation to the ICC. These faculties mean that the court cannot be the independent institution that it should be. As a consequence of this, on top of losing independence, we are also violating the principle of independence of legal bodies, the transparency and the impartiality of the administration of justice. Cuba reiterates its position to establish a criminal jurisdiction that is international, impartial, fair, complementary to national judicial systems, truly independent, and therefore not subordinate to any political interests that could dilute the main purpose for which this body was created. Madam President, the court should respect at all times the principle of right and complementarity, which is enshrined in Article 11 of the Vienna Convention on Treaty on the Law of Treaties, which is recognized by many states. We recognize that the jurisdiction of the ICC needs to remain independent of the political bodies of the UN and needs to work in a complementary function to national jurisdictions. The Rome Statute was not created to replace national courts, because that would be against the sovereignty of states. Regarding the crime of aggression that is defined in the Kampala Conference, Cuba considers that it is incomplete and does not have many elements that are important that should be included. Said definition should be generic and should include all forms of aggression that are manifest in international relations among states, and they should not be circumscribed to simply the use of armed force. Anything that might affect sovereignty, territorial integrity, and the independent politics of states. Madam President, even though Cuba is not part of the ICC, we reiterate our willingness to continue to participate in the negotiating procedures relating to this institution. This includes the resolution entitled Report to the ICC, which every year is discussed and adopted at the GA, as well as continuing with ongoing processes. To conclude, we reaffirm the will of Cuba to contribute in every way we can to facing down impunity, and we are committed to international criminal justice. We will always act in accordance with the principles of transparency, independence, and impartiality, and we will also make sure that international law is respected. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. Maintenant,
I shall now give the floor to Mr. Shi Yang, the Director of the Deputy Division Director from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. You have the floor, sir.
Madam Vice President, distinguished delegates, it's a great honor for me to address this session on behalf of the Chinese government. The Chinese government pays close attention to the work of the International Criminal Court, noting that the court has made efforts in investigation, trial, and reparation to victims and cooperation with relevant countries, and has made some progress in updating its internal policies, promoting the education and dissemination of international law. In recent years, the court has been dealing with an increasing number of situations and cases, some of which concerning world peace and stability, and are very complex and sensitive. In this context, the world keeps a close watch on the world court and its judicial activities. Facing these challenges, it's our hope that the court adhere to the mandate of the Rome Statute, lawfully perform its duties, strictly follow the principles of complementarity and international cooperation, uphold an objective and impartial stance, and exclude political interference, interpret and apply the statute and the general international law comprehensively, in good faith and with uniform standards, so as to ensure that its judicial activities are truly conducive to the realization of justice and international peace and stability, and to avoid becoming a tool for political purpose. Madam Vice President, the situation in the state of Palestine has been on the court agenda for nearly 10 years. On the question of Palestine, China always stands on the side of fairness and justice and opposes all acts that violate international law, especially international humanitarian law. As we speak here, the Gaza conflict is still dragging on, and the unprecedented humanitarian crisis is unfolding. China supports all efforts in the international community that will help to realize fairness and justice and to defend the authority of international law. Madam Vice President, the court's jurisprudence on the issue of the jurisdictional immunity of state officials has long been a controversy in the international community. Under recognized international law, incumbent head of states enjoy absolute immunity from criminal jurisdiction and inviolability. According to the rule of international law, that a treaty does not create either obligations or rights for a third state without its consent. The effect of Article 27 of the statute, which provides that immunity which may attach to the official capacity of a person, should not bar the court from exercising its jurisdiction over such a person. The article is only limited to state parties, and this article is not binding on non-state parties. Either could it be used to negate the courts and the state parties' obligation to respect the immunity from criminal jurisdiction of high-ranking officials of non-state parties under general international law. In accordance with Article 98 of the statute, the court may not proceed with a request for cooperation that might result in a breach by the requested state of its obligation to a third state. The court's practice of exercising jurisdiction over non-state parties is also controversial. It is our consistent view that the court should act in a strict compliance with the Rome Statute and may not exercise its jurisdiction over acts committed by nationals of non-state parties on the territory of non-state parties. Madam President, China attaches great importance to the role played by international criminal judicial institutions in promoting international peace and realizing fairness and justice. We hope by carrying out its functions objectively and impartially, the ICC will make its due contribution in safeguarding fairness and justice, maintaining the stability of the international order, and building lasting peace and security. Thank you.
I thank you for your intervention.
Now we shall move on to the statements of international organizations and other entities. On my list, I have the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission. Mr. Vaius Koutroulis is the member of the commission. You have the floor, sir.
Merci, Madame la Vice-Présidente.
Thank you, Madam Vice President.
Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, let me express first my gratitude to the Assembly of the States Parties for inviting the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission to attend the travaux of the Assembly as an observer and for giving us the opportunity to deliver this statement. Establishing individual criminal responsibility for grave breaches and other serious violations of international humanitarian law is among the key methods of ensuring accountability for violations of this law, but it is not the only one. Among the means of ensuring compliance with humanitarian law are also good offices, inquiries, and fact-finding. In the age of disinformation, misinformation, and fake news, a proper establishment of facts is more necessary than ever. This is the task of the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission. The Commission is established under Article 90 of the first protocol additional to the Geneva Conventions. We are neither an organ of the United Nations nor of any other international organization, either universal or regional. We are created by states parties to Protocol Additional 1, and our competence is based on states' consent. This consent has been expressed so far by 76 states, the majority of which are states parties to the ICC statute. We are an impartial, independent, non-political organization composed of 15 experts with different backgrounds. We include medical doctors, military officers, diplomats, lawyers, and we're acting in our personal capacity, and we're thus able to undertake inquiries regarding international humanitarian law violations. We are a permanent organ, predictable, ready to undertake a mission at short notice, and last but not least, our confidential, flexible procedures can be shaped depending on circumstances. They thus provide the advantage of a low-key, non-confrontational approach. The Commission has proven its worth. In 2017, when, at the request of the OSCE, it undertook a mission in eastern Ukraine to conduct an independent forensic investigation on an incident in the Luhansk province where the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission patrol was affected. And this year, Poland has requested our good offices with respect to the attack of which the World Central Kitchen was a victim on the 1st of April 2024 in Gaza. A report on this incident was prepared by the Commission and has already been handed to the Polish government. Madam Vice President, implementation of international humanitarian law depends on political will. By adhering to the Rome Statute and thus accepting the jurisdiction of this court for the most serious international crimes, states manifested such will. The will, in the words of the preamble, to put an end to impunity and thus contribute to the prevention of such crimes. The International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission gives you an additional complementary avenue towards what is in essence the same goal, contributing to the prevention of violations of humanitarian law which lie at the heart of war crimes. 56 states parties to the Rome Statute are parties to the first additional protocol but have not recognized the competence of the Commission. We encourage them to consider making such a recognition. We would also like to remind to all states, even those that are not parties to the first additional protocol, that they can use the Commission's good offices and fact-finding services on an ad hoc basis. In times of recurring humanitarian law violations, it is time to prove your commitment to ensuring respect for humanitarian law and your support to the mechanisms ensuring its respect and implementation. One strong way of doing this is by recognizing the competence of the International Humanitarian Fact-Finding Commission and using its many capabilities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much for your intervention.
I now would invite the President of the International Criminal Courts Bar Association to take the floor. Mr. Philippe Larochelle, you have the floor, sir. Thank you very much, Madam Vice President, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. It is an honor and a privilege for me to be before you today and to speak on behalf of the International Criminal Courts Bar Association. This is the association that represents the attorneys for the defense and for the victims that stand before the court.
It was very encouraging to hear yesterday and today the statements of unwavering support for the court and its functions. These are good words and good intentions, but they must be followed by deeds. The accused before this court are not always convicted. There are maybe unfortunate instances of provisional release, acquittals, withdrawal even. These must be addressed. Take the recent case of Mr. Maxime Mokom. Many months before the charges were withdrawn, the pretrial chamber ruled that Mr. Mokom should be provisionally released. Not a single one of you, 125 state parties, stepped up to assist the court in fulfilling one of its core functions, the ability to release a man awaiting his trial. I must call this a collective failure. I'm sorry. And we must learn and improve from such failures. These outcomes are the results of efforts by those of us who are, in a sense, only partially compensated for our work, the defense counsels. And on behalf of these independent defense and victim counsels, the ICCBA is asking, like everyone else in this court, the necessary resources to do our job. We are in the courtroom every day on behalf of victims and the accused, earning only a fraction of what an equivalent prosecutor earns. We disagree with the registry's calculations. They say we are now paid 20% less than our prosecution colleagues. We say it's closer to 40%. Let's take 20% for now, if you will. In this year's budgets, Your Excellencies, we requested a 3% raise to keep up with inflation. That 3% represents 150,000 euros of the overall budget. A drop in a notion of travel expenses of the court. Yet, it was rejected with no explanation. The ICCBA has tirelessly worked on these issues, engaging in numerous dialogues with many of you. Still, the result is zero. Everyone in this court is compensated for inflation, except us. Even the ICC suspects and accused receive a 3% increase on their allocation for inflation. Why not us from the ICCBA? We are also the only ones with another immense privilege, that of being taxed by the host state or our home states. At least we are discussing this issue with the support of some of you, as this taxation effectively redirects a substantial portion of funds earmarked for justice back to the host state. We urge this assembly to prioritize a swift resolution of this issue. Prisoners receive funding from family visit, but defense counsels and legal representatives do not. I live in Montreal. I have 4 children. The current legal aid policy does not realistically allow me to relocate to The Hague and commit to a trial. Even if this was financially feasible, the court does not provide health insurance, leaving individuals vulnerable in foreign country. Court staff receive schooling allowances for their children. Your Excellencies, our staff, defense and victim staff, are still waiting for letters of appointment, which also place them in a vulnerable position. This is not normal. The current legal aid policy also fails to consider the diverse realities of those who dedicate themselves to this court. Consider this. A defense counsel traveling for a 2-week hearing in The Hague from Brussels, Nairobi, or Cape Town will get a maximum of 1,200 euros for travel and accommodation. A staff person traveling from Bangui to attend a seminar will get his flight and DSA for every day he spends in The Hague. This inequity is glaring. It makes no difference whether one lives in South America, Africa, or Leiden. The amount remains the same. This prevents the true diversity of representation, which has been repeatedly called for today and yesterday, for the representation of victims and accused before this court. If the court truly aspired to better geographical representation and diversity, it must reform further the legal aid policy to enable counsel from underrepresented regions who participated in cases. Otherwise, it will remain an essentially European court. For the legal representatives of victims, they represent victims for years before any proceedings are initiated, often pro bono. Although states have included a limited amount of legal aid for this phase, no funds have been distributed due to the registry's uncertainty about allocation. LRV also face other barriers beyond funding, such as the court's refusal to grant access to ICC email or filings during these early stages, which hampers their work. States speak of victim-centered justice, yet they are unaware of the basic obstacles victims' representatives face. In conclusion, Madam President, as a counsel, a lawyer, I hate that we are here forced to have to beg again, year after year. I should not have to stand here raising these issues on behalf of my colleagues. We want to focus on our core mandate, the representation of victims and suspects of or accused persons, because the prosecutor's compass in his fight against impunity is sometime off.
But I would like to nonetheless conclude on a positive note, Madam Vice President, if I may, and in French. The defense attorneys and the attorneys' victims represent a pool of exceptional talent. People, I can guarantee you, never count their time, never count the amount of energy they pour into this court, trying to strengthen it. They continue to work with you to make the court better. We simply request that this exceptional contribution of our members be recognized for its true value, neither more nor less. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your statement, as well as for introducing some linguistic diversity in your statement. Distinguished delegates, the Bureau has recommended that we would have 45 minutes set aside for statements by non-governmental organizations. They will be able to make statements following the general debate at this stage. It is nearly 6 p.m. I would simply wish to announce that those NGOs that are on the list and that are willing to speak without interpretation can do so after 15 hours. And I just have a word here from the facilitator on the budget. The informal consultations will begin with a short delay. So we still have time to hear from the representatives of the NGOs. All right, then. Let me begin, then, with Mr. Mansour Ati, on behalf of the Defender Center, NSAF Organization, International Commission of Jurists, Lawyers for Justice in Libya, Libya Crimes Watch, and South for Human Rights. You have the floor.
Thank you. السادة الأفاضل، في الوقت الذي يشرفني فيه أن أخاطب هذه
Your Excellencies, I am honored to address this assembly today on behalf of civil society organizations, including Lawyers for Justice in Libya, Libya Crimes Watch, the International Commission of Jurists, NSAF Organization, and SALT Organization for Human Rights, and other organizations as well. I regret having to denounce the lack of accountability and justice in Libya. The accountability gap in Libya risks widening, with victims left further behind unless urgent and targeted actions are taken. I would like to clarify that my standing before you today is due to the fact that I live outside of Libya. This gives me a certain degree of security, and this compared to the defenders of human rights and activists who are living inside of Libya, because they face serious risks if they were to take similar positions to mine. Serious violations to human rights continues, and abuses amounting to serious crimes under international law, these persist across Libya, including extrajudicial killings and torture, enforced disappearances, and arbitrary detentions. These affect Libyans and non-nationals alike. Yet, justice remains elusive. Whereas the impunity of perpetrators endures in a systematic manner at all levels. The unsealing of 6 arrest warrants for war crimes committed in Tarhuna offer a glimmer of hope, but progress in other accountability efforts remains insufficient. For example, the arrest warrant for Saif al-Islam al-Gaddafi has languished unexecuted since 2011. Emblematic of the Libyan authorities' broader failures to ensure justice and accountability. In this context, the CSOs are deeply concerned that the OTP intends to complete its investigations within the next 12 months, notwithstanding the fact that investigations into detention-related crimes, crimes against migrants, and atrocities committed during the 2014 to 2020 operations remain incomplete. The prosecutor, in his roadmap to completion, identified several benchmarks to assess whether investigations could be completed by 2025. These include additional arrest warrants, trial proceedings before the court before the end of 2025, and above all, cooperation from Libyan authorities. The prosecutor also committed to regularly consult with CSOs in the completion phase. Such consultations need to be safe and meaningful, and should be critical sources for information for the prosecutor in assessing whether such benchmarks are being met. The OTP must stand by its benchmarks. Cooperation benchmarks must include unlimited access to carry out investigations across Libya. And there must be unfettered investigation inside of Libya. And we must ensure that civil society organizations supporting the court be able to continue their operations without fear of suppression. States parties to this assembly should actively engage with the Libyan authorities as well as those in neighboring countries to strongly encourage them to arrest and transfer suspects to the ICC with a view to promptly initiate trials before the court. States parties should also urge the Libyan authorities to grant access to the OTP, and it is also necessary for the court to reinforce the participation of victims and to work closely together with affected societies. And this requires giving enough protection to victims and witnesses. Also, sufficient resources are essential. States parties must ensure that the ICC has the required budget to effectively investigate crimes committed in Libya and to ensure the rights and safety of victims, witnesses, and their representatives. Libyan victims have waited long enough. This assembly has the duty to ensure that the ICC fulfills its mandate in Libya and does not terminate investigations prematurely. Justice must be delivered as long as serious crimes under international law continue to be committed and as long as perpetrators continue to commit such crimes. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup de votre intervention.
Thank you for that statement. I give the floor now to the Ms. Catherine Zengue for the League for Peace, Human Rights and Justice. You have the floor, madam. Thank you, Madam President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I take the floor on behalf of the League for Peace, Human Rights and Justice. It is an NGO that defends and protects human rights established in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which works for the defense of victims of transnational crime that, through their suffering and resilience, call to mind the need to act with determination and humanity in the fight against impunity and to help them rebuild. War crimes, crimes against humanity, genocide, continue to scar lives for life, leaving deep scars in societies as well as in individuals. These victims that are often reduced to silence by the horrors they've endured expect not only firm sentences but also reparations to the tune that meet their expectations. The Bureau has made progress, but additional efforts are necessary on behalf of the ICC to provide sustainable support to the victims. It is therefore crucial to intensify reparations programs and psychosocial support programs as well as economic programs that support individuals that have had a heavy past filled with trauma. Reparations have to go beyond economic, financial support that remains symbolic and help them rebuild their lives. Madam President, the role of state parties in this process is absolutely essential. States have the responsibility to support the court, not only in cooperation when it comes to legal proceedings, but also when it comes to continued commitment and support of victims. I ask the member state parties to the Rome Statute to support the budget of the court by providing reparations and guaranteeing that the victims are provided with appropriate support. By providing funds to the Trust Fund for Victims, you will be sending a clear message, a message that justice is not only the imposition of sanctions, but it is also a tool to rebuild. Today, we have the opportunity to show to the world that the ICC does not limit itself to a body issuing sentences, but it is a beacon of justice and human dignity. We have the opportunity to give hope to those who have broken by international crime and to build a fair society, one that's more equitable and more humane. I therefore appeal to all state parties to reinforce their commitment for victims so that their voices are never ignored and to work together on the mission of justice that is that of the court. It is far from an abstract principle. Justice is a concrete responsibility that we need to shoulder collectively for the sake of all victims. This means that us, members of civil society worldwide, we need to support the court in the face of political pressures that have no mind for the atrocities that victims have suffered. Their only objective is to reduce their voices to silence, voices that require justice. Thank you for your attention and your commitment for these essential causes. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. Thank you for your statement. I give the floor now to the representative of Venezuela Informal Network. You have the floor.
Excellencies, Madam Vice President, today I speak to you representing civil society organizations in Venezuela in one of the most severe periods of repression in our recent history. Since the elections of the 28th of July, we've seen an alarming increase in systematic and generalized violations of human rights, which include persecution on political grounds, on gender grounds, detentions that are unlawful, forced disappearances, torture, and sexual violence. The Inter-American Commission on Human Rights has condemned these actions as terrorism, as state terrorism. They've denounced the use of violence and fear as a way of consolidating authoritarian power. We should point out that even prior to the elections, the situation was dire. Right before the presidential election, there were already more than 300 political prisoners that were rounded up very quickly right before the election. And following the elections, there have been more than 2,000 new arrests, the majority of whom involve either short or long-term forced disappearances, people being heard incommunicado, denying them their legal right to a legal representation that's independent, trials without any sort of procedural guarantees, etc., etc. What's happened is that the laws and anti-terrorist legislation has been used as tools to criminalize political protests, and the judicial system has been instrumentalized in a way that makes it impossible for people to have their rights upheld. And in fact, there have been more than 18,000 people who have been arrested for political reasons in Venezuela to date. These actions in particular affect the mothers, wives, family members of those who've been arrested, threatening them with reprisals, extortion, and criminalizing them just for merely seeking justice, creating unbearable suffering. And for defense attorneys, they've been accused of terrorism. One example of this is Kennedy Tejeda. He was a lawyer for Foro Penal, and he's somebody who was arrested as a terrorist because he was defending people who were arrested during a peaceful protest. And so this climate of repression has also had a deep and negative impact on CSOs. Many of them have been dismantled or have been forced into exile. Many people who defend human rights in Venezuela who would be here otherwise are not here for this very same reason. Now, despite the presence of a technical assistance office of the ICC in Caracas, the attacks against the civilian population have intensified. We don't have enough transparency when it comes to the cooperation agreements, and the lack of any political will to guarantee genuine justice is something that undermines whatever efforts are being undertaken by the ICC. And because of this, we would request the following of the court. First of all, the investigations underway have to be sped up. We have to start targeting high-level people who are responsible for this and start issuing arrest warrants. Secondly, we have to reevaluate the complementarity strategy to make sure that we avoid the justice system falling into the wrong hands by perpetrators who would simply make the judicial power in giving them carte blanche to do what they want. And let me just remind you that the appeals chamber has already concluded that the Venezuelan judiciary was not carrying out genuine investigations. Thirdly, there should be a public statement before the president's inauguration reaffirming the court's commitment to justice and warning about the potential consequences of continuing with repressive acts. And fourthly, adopt concrete measures to protect the victims and human rights organizations, including a direct dialogue with the prosecutor of the court whenever he visits the country. Representatives, Vice President, the International Criminal Court is one of the final hopes for the victims, and its mission in such circumstances is crucial. We would encourage you all to enhance your financial and political support to the court. Inaction in Venezuela stands as testimony to the price that we pay. The international community has to adopt firm and decisive measures in order to put an end to impunity, as stated in the preamble of the statute. Justice in Venezuela can wait no longer. Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much for that statement, distinguished delegates. Our interpretation services are finished for the day. And so I would like to take this opportunity to thank the interpreters for having given us this extension of their working time. Thank you very much. The interpreters thank the Vice President for her kind words. Enjoy your evening.
And the next organization on my list is Atrocities Watch Africa, represented by Mr. Owiso. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you. On behalf of Atrocities Watch Africa, we wish to offer the following observations to the Assembly of States Parties, particularly regarding the need for equal and robust action in all situations in which the court has jurisdiction. Atrocities Watch is concerned about the disparity in the attention given by the court to certain situations. In this context, we would like to raise urgent concern about the situation in Sudan. The Sudan war has displaced roughly 11.2 million people and has been characterized by ground attacks on civilians, indiscriminate aerial bombardment, extrajudicial killings, conflict-related sexual violence, and obstruction of humanitarian aid. We agree with the prosecutor that the absence of any meaningful justice for the serious crimes committed in Darfur 20 years ago has sown the seeds for this latest cycle of violence and suffering. Nearly 2 decades since the Darfur situation was referred to the court by the Security Council and the first arrest warrants were issued, only 2 cases have commenced and no final judgments have been issued. We welcome the new round of investigations announced by the prosecutor, but we encourage the office to act with greater urgency in filing additional cases, particularly in relation to well-documented crimes in El Geneina in 2023 and in El Fasher over the past 6 months. In addition, the prosecutor should examine the role of external actors in facilitating ongoing violence in Darfur. We call upon states parties to support these investigations through appropriate cooperation. This should include both public and financial support for the ongoing investigations and redoubling efforts to enforce existing warrants in the Darfur situation, including by exerting diplomatic pressure on Sudan. Meanwhile, more than 7 million people have been displaced in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, more than 6.5 million in the eastern provinces of North and South Kivu and Ituri. Amid ongoing fighting, the displaced are facing acute food insecurity. While we welcome the prosecutor's October 2024 statement that additional investigations would be undertaken, we highlight that the situation is indeed urgent. In addition, we would like to ask the court and the Assembly to prioritize the situation in Nigeria. The country has been suffering violence and insecurity at least for the last 15 years. Boko Haram has killed civilians, attacked schools, abducted women and children, and forced them to fight or to serve as sex slaves. The Nigerian military has also committed a range of violations, including extrajudicial executions, enforced disappearances, torture, sexual violence, and other violations. Despite these serious crimes, the situation in Nigeria remained under preliminary examination for 10 years, with former prosecutor Fatou Bensouda only initiating investigations in 2020. In the last 4 years, although the preliminary examination has been closed, no investigation has been opened. This lack of action leaves victims feeling abandoned and emboldens perpetrators. In addition, the lack of communication about the status of the cases exacerbates the sense of neglect and leaves victims in limbo. On the 2nd of December 2024, Amnesty International and Jiredol Networks filed an application with the President of the Pretrial Division asking for a chamber to be designated to examine victims' request to compel the prosecutor to seek authorization to open an investigation. We do hope that this provides incentive for the Office of the Prosecutor to urgently clarify its position. We thank you for your time and consideration of these matters.
Thank you very much for your intervention. And now I give the floor to Ms. Kristina Kit from Ukrainian Women Lawyers Association, JURFEM. You have the floor.
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, and dear colleagues, we are addressing the International Criminal Court to draw attention to the conflict-related sexual violence, which is part of a large-scale systematic attack on the civilian population by Russian military personnel in Ukraine. Since 2022, Ukrainian prosecutors have documented more than 150,000 war crimes cases, including 326 facts of conflict-related sexual violence. We must also understand that the real number of sexual violence is significantly large as a very official registered crime. There are more than 10 unregistered cases. Thus, we can speak of approximately 3,000 cases of conflict-related sexual violence committed by Russians against Ukrainians. The practice of the sexual violence against Ukrainians by Russian military personnel is not new. As publication and research by historians demonstrate, sexual violence against the civilian population of Ukrainian territory was massively used by Russian occupying troops during World War I, the Ukrainian Revolution 1970 and 1921, during World War II, and also afterwards during the armed confrontation between Soviet authorities and Ukrainian nationalist underground. The Ukrainian Women Lawyers Association, JURFEM, provides legal assistance for survivors of conflict-related sexual violence. Among the survivors are women, men, and children. For example, we provide help to entire families, mother, father, and children. Russians in groups would enter homes where a civilian lived and committed rape of a woman in front of her husband, simultaneously holding a gun to his temple, after which they would commit rape of young children in the adjacent room. These crimes have a systematic nature in every settlement that has been or remains occupied by Russians. Analyzing the context and patterns, we can say that conflict-related sexual violence committed by Russian military personnel has all the hallmarks of not only a war crime, but also a crime against humanity and genocide. For example, in the Kherson region, prosecutors have documented crimes by Russian military personnel such as rape, torture, and gender-based violence against mothers, wives, and sisters of Ukrainian armed forces soldiers, all of which are nothing other than patterns aimed at destroying the Ukrainian nation genocide. It is important to consider the gender component in documenting and recording all instances of sexual violence. In the context of full-scale war,
we have achieved significant results in the direction of forming a policy of response and providing assistance to victims of CRSV. The main results include adoption of an investigation strategy for sexual violence crime with a victim-oriented approach, creation of a coordination center for supporting witnesses and victims of war crimes, a law on urgent interim reparation for survivors of CRSV has been adopted. Legal, medical help, psychological support, and social services for victims are being implemented. However, justice at the national level is insufficient to ensure satisfaction for victims of conflict-related sexual violence and guarantee of non-repetition. For each victim of CRSV, it is important to see real steps from international judicial institutions, including the International Criminal Court, to investigate cases of conflict-related sexual violence committed by Russian soldiers as issue arrest warrants for command and senior leadership for committing these crimes as part of a large-scale systematic attack on the civil population in Ukraine. After all, only justice at the international level for sexual violence crimes, regardless of the armed conflict in which they are committed, can indicate guarantees of non-repetition in the future. Only by joint efforts we can make conflict-related sexual violence crimes visible and ensure justice for survivors. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your intervention. And now I'm giving the floor to Ms. Sarah Babayan from Center for Truth and Justice. You have the floor, madam.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, dear colleagues. It is my great pleasure to address the Assembly of State Parties on behalf of the Center for Truth and Justice and the International Partnership for Human Rights. CFDJ is a US-based international human rights organization documenting atrocity crimes and pursuing accountability for perpetrators of war crimes and human rights violations. Soldiers and civilians were forced to crawl on the floor like animals, slapped, kicked, and beaten on their faces and stomachs with sharp metal rods and heavy weapons. An entire population imprisoned for 9 months in an open cage to starve to death without food, water, electricity, or medicine. Women being tortured and mistreated so badly that death must have felt like a gift. Naked bodies on the streets, eyes gouged and replaced with stones, legs and ears cut off. Hours of inhumane and humiliating treatment in prisons, fearing every second could be their last. Executions and beheadings of POWs and civilians followed with a display of heads on dead pigs. 100,000 people forced to escape immediately, coerced by torture and willful killings to abandon their homes and lands. Ghost towns are the sole remnants. It sounds like a horror movie, but it's not. Imagine that these terrible atrocities are happening right on your doorstep, in your towns, to your fellow citizens. Tragically, we are only talking about the Armenians who have been systematically persecuted and expelled for decades by the Republic of Azerbaijan. This dictatorship disregards orders and judgments of the ICJ and the ECHR and talks about the Armenians as rats and devils. Most importantly, Aliyev openly declares his territorial ambitions, proclaiming, "I said that Armenia is the land of our ancestors. We must return there, we will return, and we are already returning. No one can stop us." Does this sound familiar to you with regard to the Russian aggression in Ukraine? The crimes committed against the Armenians in Nagorno-Karabakh, as well as within the sovereign territory of Armenia, have been extensively analyzed by numerous organizations, including CFDJ, Freedom House, fact-finding missions, special rapporteurs, and others. The evidence is irrefutable and overwhelming. Since 2021, Azerbaijan has perpetrated war crimes and crimes against humanity, including persecution and deportation. for the crime against humanity in case it could be considered analogous to the Myanmar-Bangladesh situation, where the ICC just ordered an arrest warrant against Myanmar's president. Our database contains the evidence and a comprehensive legal analysis of alleged crimes already for release. But it is not on us. It is on you, dear delegates, to refer the situation to the Office of the Prosecutor for the initiation of preliminary investigation. It is also incumbent on the distinguished prosecutor Khan to initiate an investigation. With Russia's ongoing war of aggression and its brutal strategy of retribution against those who oppose it, we already have a very clear expectation of what awaits Armenians in the situation of Azerbaijan. That's why we urgently call on you, state parties, to fulfill your obligation by making a collective state referral to the ICC. Only through this referral will impunity be halted and accountability enforced, deterring dictator Aliyev from continuing its Islamophobic policies through war crimes and crimes against humanity. If we continue to deliberately close our eyes, there's a significant risk of another war of aggression on Europe's eastern border, which could lead to additional 3 million refugees for Europe to address. Unlike other ongoing conflicts, this one is distinctly foreseeable. Time is now. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to the representative, the Philippine Coalition for the ICC, Network Against Killings in Philippines, and Center Law. You have the floor, sir.
Madam President, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the Assembly of State Parties, a woman human rights defender helped us in writing this statement, but cannot deliver it due to serious security concerns. I am Gilbert Teruel Andres, and I stand before you today on behalf of the Philippine Coalition for the International Criminal Court, alongside its members, Amnesty International Philippines, Center Law Philippines, and Network Against Killings in the Philippines. We are committed to the pursuit of justice for the thousands upon thousands of victims of crimes against humanity in our country, the Philippines. These gross crimes stemming from a brutal campaign against drugs, dubbed as the war on drugs, has claimed thousands of lives, including children, are a profound affront to humanity, the rule of law, and human rights. A city mayor from Davao, Rodrigo Duterte, who became president for 6 years in our country, thinks people who are in any way involved in drugs have to be killed under the guise of curbing criminality and for peace and order in the Philippines. The impact on children and young people is among the most heart-wrenching aspect of these atrocities. In this grim chapter of the Philippines, children and young people were not merely bystanders, they have been direct victims. The youngest victim that our member organization has documented is a 5-month-old baby killed during a joint police-military operation that targeted the baby's father. Both parents and the baby were killed. Children have been killed in acts of violence, experienced gruesome torture, while others have been orphaned, traumatized, and left vulnerable to further abuses, exploitation, and harm. There are instances when children in street situations and children in conflict with the law, and those dubbed as recidivists in petty and mostly survival crimes such as robbery and theft, have been deliberately targeted and included in the drug watch list. The torture and killings, including of children and young people, have not stopped. They continue. Crimes against humanity in the context of the war on drugs still persist in the Philippines up to this day. The ICC epitomizes their only hope, even their last resort for justice, as domestic mechanisms have failed to deliver effective remedies, genuine justice, and accountability. We urge this esteemed assembly to ensure that the ICC fulfills its mandate by taking urgent, decisive actions to hasten progress on the Philippine situation. This call is rooted in 3 pressing imperatives. First, the children can't wait. Justice delayed is justice denied. Children and young people who have been victims of crimes against humanity in the Philippines must be prioritized. Every day of inaction aggravates the harm, robbing survivors and families of closure, healing, and peace. Every day of inaction further emboldens perpetrators and puts children, young people, and the victim's family at risk and grave danger. We urge the Assembly of State Parties to ensure that the ICC, which is so far away from these children, is not just a dream, but a reality, and that equitable justice will be a reality very soon. Second, victims' rights to participate at the center. The Rome Statute enshrines victims' rights to participation and reparation. The prolonged process can marginalize the very people the ICC intends to serve. Victims' families who are impoverished and live in constant fear and injustice feel increasingly out of reach. Many of whom live in constant fear and poverty look up to the ICC as their only path towards fair justice. We call on the Assembly to ensure that the ICC will be allocated adequate resources and that the victims are at the center in these ICC proceedings. They are able to participate, be heard, and their cries for justice are acted upon without delay. Third, end impunity. Crimes against humanity, especially crimes against and affecting children, are among the gravest violations of international law. If those responsible are allowed to escape accountability, it sends a perilous message to the world that the very human rights of children and people can be trampled upon with impunity. Justice delayed at the ICC will reverberate far beyond borders. It will embolden perpetrators. It will weaken faith in the court of last resort and international justice mechanisms. It will diminish hope. On behalf of the victims of crimes against humanity brought about by the bloody war on drugs in the Philippines, including the children and young people who are urgently yearning for justice, we call on the Assembly to act with urgency, act with compassion, and ensure that the International Criminal Court fulfills its mandate to the victims. Lastly, to our nation, the Philippines, we reiterate our call for the Philippines to fully cooperate with and rejoin the ICC. The Filipino people deserves nothing less. Thank you and padayon.
Thank you very much. And now I give the floor to Mr. Raji Al-Surani on behalf of Adamer Al-Haq Europe, Al-Mezan, Defense for Children International Palestine, and the Palestinian Center for Human Rights. You have the floor, sir.
Thank you, Madam Vice President, ladies and gentlemen. For the last 14 months, Israel just did whatever they want to do in Gaza, war crimes, crimes against humanity, persecution, genocide, all the way long. This is unprecedented in the history of prolonged belligerent criminal occupation. Since 1967, never ever we faced anything as such. Massive destruction, massive killing, starvation, and displacement for the entire population of the Gaza Strip. More, in the last couple of months, the north of Gaza, in unprecedented way as well, was subject to bombing, destruction, starvation. And this raised very, very urgent concern to stop this. How many should die We already have 17,000 children, 14,000 women, around 120,000 injured, unable to be treated even humanly. This happening in live stream. The whole world watching it, seeing it, and unable to stop it. What's going on Gaza, unspeakable. Big shame, not for Israel, but for those who practice the conspiracy of silence, for those who legitimize what Israel is doing, claiming self-defense. Since when ever occupation, belligerent criminal occupation, can have the right of self-defense? That's evil, and that's real shock for the legal justice system across the globe. The general's plan, which is implementing for the last 2 months in Gaza, should stop, and the genocide which is going on should stop promptly, immediately, without any delay. Our engagement with the ICC, long and deep, since 2009. And Palestine was recognized as member state and effectively engaged since January 2015. Yes, on the 21st of November, it was a history made, a day for ending this prolonged immunity for Israel. And finally, we managed to have 2 warrants by the pre-trial chamber with consensus. We welcome that, and we think this is a great job, and we appreciate it. But the crimes didn't begin October 7th, and this didn't address the genocide. There is many crimes there since 2014, the mandate of the ICC. It's the blockade on Gaza for 17 years. It's the war of 2014. It's the Great March of Return. It's the 2021 offensive 22 and May 23. And this genocide, which is not yet addressed. We are talking about one of the most well-documented conflicts in modern history. There is no lack of evidence. We are lack of quick, firm, and effective procedure. There are some states, unfortunately, when this decision was taken, they threatened the court. And they said they are going to impose sanctions. The most powerful state on the earth, United States of America, threatening with that. And they say judges, prosecutors, and others can be subject to this harassment. And some other states, France, Netherlands, the host country of the ICC, saying that this is something should be considered, and we cannot apply ultimately the warrant. Article 27, clear-cut, simple, blind can read it. Member states should apply warrants of the court, and act accordingly. No immunity for criminals, and law is there to hold accountable those who violated it at the daylight. I think the situation in Gaza and what's going on in the occupied territories at large, making ICC and the international justice system a real serious challenge. First, what word we want? Word of rule of law or rule of jungle? Is Gaza going to be the graveyard of international law, international humanitarian law, or to be a landmark for justice and dignity for man? All of us dreaming of a world with justice, with dignity, with rule of law. We dream of equality, no selectivity or politicization of international law. International legal system should be defended and should prevail. I want to conclude with a simple word that ICC member states have great responsibility. They cannot allow a bunch of countries hijack justice and impose rule of law. We want to see the ICC with a quick delivery for justice, and we want to see ICC member states standing for their moral and legal obligation in defending the justice system as it should be. Thank you, Madam Vice President.
And the last speaker on my list is Mrs. Momina Yari, on behalf of the Afghanistan Organization for Development of Human Rights, Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, the Coalition for the Prevention of Hazara Genocide, and the Transitional Justice Coordination Group. You have the floor, Madam.
Madam Vice President, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good evening to all of you. I know you're all tired, but thank you very much before I'm starting for your patience. Thank you for the opportunity to address the Assembly of State Parties on behalf of the Afghanistan Human Rights and Democracy Organization, Afghanistan Transitional Justice Coordination Group, and Afghanistan Organization for Development of Human Rights, in Coalition for the Prevention of Hazara Genocide. I am from Afghanistan, a country where women and girls are no longer treated as human beings, where ethnic and religious minorities face widespread discrimination and even genocide, where Afghan citizens are subjected to political and cultural persecution, and where the mechanisms for domestic accountability are absent. In this vacuum of justice and accountability, the Afghan people turn to the international community, including this assembly, as a beacon of hope to end impunity for the most egregious crimes committed against them. Gender persecution and gender apartheid. Most critically, we are witnessing blatant gender persecution in Afghanistan, and what can only be described as gender apartheid. Since the Taliban's takeover in 2021, there has been a systematic and institutionalized campaign to violently oppress women and girls in Afghanistan, with conditions rapidly deteriorating these violence. Through a series of draconian decrees, the Taliban has stripped women of their rights and freedoms, effectively erasing them from public life and subjecting those who repressive country in the world for women. Afghanistan has become the most repressive country in the world for the women and girls. And all these is happening before our eyes, unchallenged and unobstructed. Distinguished delegates, allow me to paint a picture, a dark and harrowing picture of what life has become for women and girls in Afghanistan. Girls are no longer allowed to attend school beyond the 6th grade. And women are barred from secondary education and universities. Horrible. Women have been effectively excluded from the workforce and completely removed from political and public decision-making roles. With female politicians, judges, and civil servants systematically ousted, women are further forbidden from leaving their home without a male guardian and, when permitted outside, must wear full body coverings. They are also banned from accessing parks, gyms, and public baths, and are even prohibited from singing or speaking publicly, unfortunately. Women who protest against these restrictions face constant threats, arbitrary arrest, imprisonment, and in some cases, enforced disappearance, fueling fears of brutal reprisal for any form of dissent. There is credible evidence of women being subjected to arbitrary detention, beatings, floggings, targeting killings, torture, rape, and other forms of sexual violence in Afghanistan. With many human rights organizations holding that these acts may amount to crimes against humanity. The Taliban remains defiant and show no intention of changing their behavior, leaving women increasingly vulnerable and unprotected. Distinguished delegates, I would like to bring your attention here. Ethnic and religious minorities. There has been a persistent pattern of targeting and deliberate attack against ethnic and religious minorities in Afghanistan. Particularly the Shia Hazara community. The Hazara community has long endured systematic and widespread discrimination, a painful history that has only deepened in recent years. Under Taliban rule, the Hazara community has been excluded from decision-making role in government institutions, banned from practicing and teaching the Shia faith, subject to excessive taxation, and exposed to acts of violence, among others. This violence is further exacerbated by the actions of the Islamic State for Khorasan province, ISKP, which has perpetrated target killings and horrific attacks on Hazara educational institutions, places of worship, hospitals, and sports centers. Many human rights organizations have also expressed serious concerns that these acts may amount to the crime of genocide against Hazara community. Accountability. Distinguished delegates and Madam Vice President, the situation in Afghanistan demands urgent and coordinated actions by the state parties. A culture of impunity has prevailed in Afghanistan for far too long, perpetrating cycles of violence and injustice, leaving victims without redress and emboldening perpetrators. In the absence of domestic accountability mechanisms in Afghanistan, the International Criminal Court remains a vital venue for addressing long-standing injustice in Afghanistan. We therefore leave you with the following recommendation, Madam Vice President. First, we urge the Office of the Prosecutor to continue its investigation into the situation in Afghanistan and ensure that its investigation addresses all relevant crimes committed by the implicated parties in Afghanistan, including the Taliban, ISKP, the national and international forces. Second, we urge state parties to provide the cooperation and resources necessary for the Office of the Prosecutor investigations to ensure accountability for the crimes committed in Afghanistan.
Please, Madam, try to conclude.
This includes facilitating and collecting evidence from Afghan refugee and diaspora communities, and prioritizing the protection of witness by strengthening international mechanisms for witness protection and implementing other security measures for these at risk.
Can you please conclude?
I am trying. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, please.
Third, we urge state parties that have been military presence in Afghanistan to ensure transparent and meaningful investigations into alleging of war crimes committed by their forces in Afghanistan. Finally, we urge state parties to support an all-tools approach to ensure justice and accountability in Afghanistan. This includes proceedings with the case against Afghanistan before the International Court of Justice for CEDAW violation, codifying gender apartheid and the upcoming crimes against humanity treaty. We expect that from the court. Using universal jurisdiction, establishing an independent international accountability mechanisms for Afghanistan, supporting the UN Special Rapporteur mandate in implementing his recommendations. Thank you very much for your patience and attention. Thanks.
Thank you very much. This concludes my list of speakers. Thank you, distinguished delegate. Thank you all for taking part in this general debate and expressing your support for the court and for the international criminal justice system. Let me do some announcements. I wish to remind you that the informal budget consultations are reserved for state parties and will start in this very room just after the conclusion of the adjournment of this session. If there are no further requests for the floor, I declare this session adjourned.